Chapter 634. After walking out of the teleportation formation that connected Puyo Heavenly Realm to Yuhua Heavenly Realm, Wuxia and Princess Zhonglu flew up into the sky and flew in the direction of Green Cliff Planet. With their current cultivation base, Wuxia and Princess Zhonglu could travel across the void by teleporting, leaving a small galaxy behind them with just a blink of their bodies. In less than one day, a large planet came into their sight. The Green Cliff Planet was right before their eyes. Today's Green Cliff Planet was very different from a few years ago. Yuanhua sect was flourishing, with Patriarch Yuanhua's cultivation base growing deeper and deeper. Furthermore, he had obtained an upper-grade immortal item that was nearly invincible in the eyes of lower-grade heaven immortals from outer heavenly realms. As a result, many powers in Puyo Heavenly Realm had undergone a major reshuffle, forming an interest group with Yuanhua sect as the leader. In Puyo Heavenly Realm, one could ignore Immortal Chuan's words, but no one dared to disobey Patriarch Yuanhua's words. The number of Yuanhua sect's disciples was increasing day by day, and the number of planets under its direct or indirect control had reached more than 10. The number of energy stones, immortal stones, herbs and spirit items kept increasing as well. Although they had lost 2 sect elders, Daoist Min and Daoist Qi, Yuanhua sect was showing signs of prosperity. Right in front of Wuxia and Princess Zhonglu, outside the atmosphere of Green Cliff Planet, 2 heaven immortals were busy leading a group of nascent divinity cultivators. Between them was a small hill, about 1,000 feet tall. It had 81 apertures, each filled with a large amount of immortal stones and engraved with countless runes and runes. Shaped like a bamboo shoot, the hill was translucent and shrouded in a faint layer of green light, emanating a very powerful energy wave. 2 heaven immortals hovered next to it with a compass in their hands, directing the group of about 100 nascent divinity cultivators to adjust the position of the hill. Wuxia looked into the distance and saw a similar hill hovering in the void several thousand miles away. He scanned it with his divine will and found that there were a total of 36 such hills outside the atmosphere of Green Cliff Planet, protecting the entire planet according to the position of the heavenly divinity. What the 2 celestial immortals were doing at the moment was to determine the location of the final mountain. Only then would the defensive formation be completed. Only those extremely powerful sects were qualified to construct this kind of defensive formation that completely enveloped a planet. Such a grand formation was extremely troublesome to refine and required an astronomical amount of materials. And yet, it possessed a formidable defensive power. Even the average high-grade heavenly immortal would have a hard time breaking through it. In just a few short years, Yuanhua sect actually had the overall strength to construct such a formation. It had greatly surprised Wuxia, and he wondered where they found so many supreme-grade materials. 36 small mountains served as the base of the array. They were capable of withstanding the attack of a high-grade heavenly immortal. The materials used to make them were no ordinary materials. Each of them was the equivalent of a high-grade immortal artifact in order to withstand the power of the array. Yuanhua sect is really rich now. Wuxia looked thoughtfully at the 36 small mountains. Smiling, he said to Princess Zhonglu, They are all good materials, but it's a pity that the formation is too weak. It's just an ordinary trapping formation that draws in the power of the heavenly divinity. Oh, the mountain gate of the underhand sect still lacks a powerful protective formation. Right after Wuxia said that, Princess Zhonglu narrowed her eyes and smiled, making them look like 2 crescent moons. If my husband likes it, we can just rob it, she said in a crisp voice. After all, the purpose of our return is to kill and burn, so why should we be polite to them? With a flick of her sleeve, the pale purple long sleeve suddenly transformed into a sheet of strong purple light and sprinkled down. The 36 small mountains trembled, then spun and flew into the purple light, disappearing in the blink of an eye. 36 small mountains appeared out of thin air in Princess Zhongli's interstitial world. Her interstitial world was only about 1 foot in circumference, and these 36 small mountains were as small as a speck of dust in it. The 2 heaven immortals who were directing the formation were shocked. Chi-Chi turned around and looked at Wuxia and Princess Zhonglu, who were about 100 miles away. One of them, a Taoist with a big beard and a pair of eyes that shone like stars, cried out sternly, "Who dares to come to Green Cliff Planet and court death?" Are you hungry? Wuxia suddenly slapped his sleeve and cried out in a deep voice. Aobuzin quickly poked his head out from the sleeve. Smilingly, he glanced to the left and right, then said while wagging his head, I'm hungry, but Lao Tzu dared not to come out and look for food along the way. Alas, you are having a good time all the way, but Lao Tzu is so hungry that water is flowing out of his stomach. Wuxia was thick-skinned. When he heard Aobuzin's teasing, he burst into laughter as if nothing had happened. Princess Zhonglu was a shy girl. When she heard Aobuzin's words, Princess Zhonglu could not help but feel ashamed and angry. With her face blushing, Princess Zhonglu grabbed Aobuzin and threw him away with all her strength. Aobuzin cried out in a strange voice, then transformed into a beam of black light and sped towards the two heaven immortals. The two heaven immortals only saw a beam of black light coming at them, and they thought that Princess Zhonglu had unleashed an immortal item to attack them. Hastily, they cried out and unleashed two immortal swords that were shrouded in raging flames, slashing down towards Xiang Ao's head. Sword beams rained down like raindrops and raging flames filled the sky. Two sword beams circled around Aobuzin and slashed wildly, causing countless sparks to shoot out from Aobuzin's body. Even Wuxia could not figure out the background of Aobuzin, nor could he figure out how many trump cards he had. Although Aobuzin's cultivation base had not recovered, and his overall strength was only comparable to a lower-grade heaven immortal, his dragon scales were ridiculously strong. Although the two immortal swords were slashing wildly around him, not a single mark could be seen on his scales. On the contrary, the edges of the two immortal swords were riddled with holes and nicks, as if they had been bitten by teeth. The two unlucky heaven immortals controlled their sword beams to circle around Aobuzin and slash wildly. With every slash, a row of nicks would appear on their swords. When the immortal swords were damaged, the immortal souls of the two heaven immortals suffered a backlash as well. With every slash, their internal organs trembled violently, and blood sprayed out from their mouths. However, their sword beams were extremely fast, and their sword techniques were extremely fierce. In just a second, they had slashed over 100 times at Aobuzin, and as a result, both of them had coughed out over 100 mouthfuls of blood. The pale golden immortal blood sprayed out like a fountain. It was an indescribably bizarre situation. Aobuzin opened his mouth and swallowed the two immortal swords, then growled. You two prodigal sons! Every mouthful of your blood essence belongs to Lao Tzu. How is Lao Tzu going to eat it after you've coughed it all out? TSK, can Lao Tzu still eat the things that come out of your mouths with your saliva? While murmuring, Aobuzin transformed into a beam of black light and came before the two immortals, opening his mouth and swallowing them in one gulp. Just a moment ago, he was complaining that the blood they spat out was mixed with saliva and could not be eaten, but now he swallowed them whole. At this moment, he no longer cared about the fact that their mouths were full of saliva. Wuxia shook his head and murmured in a low voice, It's good enough to have something to eat. Look at that catfish flood dragon. When has she ever been picky? Aobuzin's ears were very sensitive. Even though there was no air in the air, he could still hear Wuxia's murmur when Wuxia's words disappeared without a trace. Then he turned his head and said disdainfully, That ugly catfish? How can she be compared to me? Lao Tzu is an ancient true dragon, and she has not even cultivated her dragon body. How can she be compared to Lao Tzu? Lao Tzu has always been particular about delicacy when he eats. While praising himself, Aobuzin rushed into the group of cultivators, who were trembling with fear, opened his mouth and swallowed the 100 nascent divinity cultivators as well. Just a moment ago, he was bragging about how delicacy he ate, but in the next moment, he had swallowed 100 living people. Aobuzin's face was indeed covered with a thick layer of dragon scales, and his skin was much thicker than that of ordinary people. Aobuzin burped contentedly, then spat out a large number of clothes, shoes, and socks from his mouth. I'm full, I'm really full, he murmured. Can I eat all the people on this green cliff planet? Moving his front claws nimbly, Aobuzin kept drooling from the corner of his mouth. If there are a few beautiful female immortals, I can let Lao Tzu have a good time first. What do you think? Without saying a word, Wuxia and Princess Zhonglu transformed into beams of light and descended toward the green cliff planet. When they passed by Ao Buzin, Wuqi grabbed him by the neck and shoved him into his sleeve. Mockingly, Wuqi flicked Ao Buzin's forehead and said, "With your body that is less than 2 feet tall, you still want to find a woman?" Ao Buzin was so angry that smoke was coming out of his mouth. Although Lao Tzu's body is small, it is strong and strong. He roared furiously. That does not depend on his size, but on his skills and experience, the kung fu that Lao Tzu has cultivated for millions of years. Kung fu, do you know? Princess Zhonglu snorted coldly and gave Ao Buzin a fierce glare. Subconsciously, Ao Buzin shrank his neck and obediently hid in Wuqi's sleeve. After the time it took to finish a pot of tea, perhaps thinking that Princess Zhonglu had forgotten what had happened just now, Ao Buzin poked his head out again and murmured, "Poor Lao Tzu. Even though he was reborn, he is still a young man. If Lao Tzu's old acquaintances knew about this, they would laugh at him to death. Alas, you people who have had enough to eat and drink, how would you know the pain I'm suffering here?" A thunderclap echoed out as a thunderbolt struck heavily on Ao Buzin's head, making him twitch and twitch violently. Quickly, Ao Buzin retreated into Wuqi's sleeve, not daring to utter any more nonsense. Princess Zhonglu stared fixedly at Wuqi's sleeve for a long time. When she realized that Ao Buzin really did not say a word, she gave a cold snort and grabbed Wuqi's hand sulkily. 2 beams of light flew into Green Cliff Planet's atmosphere, and from afar, they could hear the urgent ringing of the alarm coming from Green Cliff Mountain. 2 heaven immortals and over 100 nascent divinity cultivators were killed, and the soul jade slips of these people were shattered at the same time. How could this be hidden from the cultivators of Yuanhua sect? The defensive formation on Green Cliff Mountain was activated, and the alarm was ringing. Immediately, all the cultivators of Yuanhua sect gathered on the mountain. Seeing that the entire Green Cliff Mountain was completely enveloped by the defensive formation, Wuqi and Princess Zhonglu grinned coldly. Instead of going to Green Cliff Mountain, they flew straight towards the cave abode they had built on the ocean many years ago. The purpose of their return to Green Cliff Planet was not only to settle the old scores, but also to take away some things. For example, the energy veins of various sizes on Green Cliff Planet. Chapter 635. The vast ocean was shrouded in a misty mist. A bright moon hung high in the sky, and the ocean rippled and sparkled with silvery gleams. Some fish and dragons were seen floating on the surface of the ocean, quietly inhaling and exhaling the moonlight and starlight, dreaming of awakening their sentience and cultivating into demon immortals one day. The island where Wuqi and Princess Zhonglu built their cave abode was now occupied by a few elite junior disciples of Yuanhua sect. All the restrictive spells in the cave abode were broken, and the immortal energy vein where Wuqi hid was completely exposed. By now, the island had become a first-class blessed land in Yuanhua sect. Unless one was the most favored and had the best aptitude, no one was allowed to take even half a step into the cave abode. However, as the alarms on Green Cliff Mountain were ringing, the disciples who were cultivating in seclusion in the cave abode had long rushed to Green Cliff Mountain on their flying swords. As a result, only a few apprentice servants were left on the island, and the island's defensive formation had been activated. However, it was not as good as the one Wuqi had constructed that day. Looking at the island down below, Wuqi and Princess Zhonglu exchanged a smile. Wuqi pointed at the surface of the ocean and said with a leisurely smile, "Zixian, it's your turn. Your divine ability is perfect for this task. Instead, it's my chaotic energy that makes it inconvenient for me to attack." Princess Zhonglu nodded happily. She rolled up her long sleeves, and vaguely, a 5-colored gleam could be seen wheeling on her 10 fingers. Then she gave a clear cry, and dozens of 5-colored specks shot out from her fingertips. Suddenly, a large sheet of green smoke rushed out from the crevice on the screen-shaped island, transforming into a thick layer of cloud that shielded the entire island. Then the 5-colored specks shot into the cloud, and suddenly, a series of explosions rang out from within the green cloud. Suddenly, huge waves rose from the surface of the ocean even though there was no wind, each reaching several hundred feet high. The green cloud was blown to pieces, and the screen-shaped mountain was broken in half. Soil and rocks were sent flying several miles high into the air, while boulders of various sizes were sent flying dozens of miles away. It startled those fish and dragons that were floating on the surface of the ocean, making them let out sharp and unpleasant cries and flee into the distance. The few Taoist apprentices who stayed on the island screamed in fear. They ran out of their caves, waving their arms and legs, and rushed to the beach along a newly built staircase on the mountain. Trembling, they found a large reef that seemed to be safe to hide on. Wuxia gave them a glance, and was too lazy to argue with them. Casually, he drew a circle on the ocean down below. The surging ocean became as calm as before, and the area 10,000 miles in circumference became as flat as a mirror, with a bright moon clearly embedded in the crystal-like water surface. Princess Zhongli chuckled. 10 thin beams of 5-colored divine light shot out of her fingertips, smashing into the ocean around the island at lightning speed. A rumble rang out from the depths of the ocean as the beams of 5-colored divine light pierced through the thick rock stratum and bound up several large energy veins with the island as the core. If it were an ordinary heaven immortal, he or she would not be able to extract energy veins from under the ground. But as Princess Zhongli was a gold immortal, and she was cultivating the mysterious great Tao of ancient gods, which was in line with the natural laws of heaven and earth, every move she made was accompanied by the tremendous power of heaven and earth. As soon as the 5-colored divine light touched the energy veins, they began to twist and turn like obedient dogs without Princess Zhongli's help. The energy veins under the ocean were usually about 100 miles in diameter, and tens of thousands of miles in length. The largest energy vein among them stretched from Green Cliff Mountain all the way to the ocean, stretching hundreds of thousands of miles in length. It was truly a huge energy vein. As soon as these energy veins moved, the earth energy rushed over. The rock stratum trembled violently, and half of the Green Cliff planet was shaken violently. Countless mountains and hills collapsed, while the valleys and plains rose up and turned into new mountain ranges. In just a blink of an eye, half of the Green Cliff planet had changed completely, and the terrain had changed completely. A faint dragon roar could be heard coming from under the ocean, and a terrible wave of natural energy swept over. Wuxia and Princess Zhongli both had a hard time breathing, and were nearly choked by the strong natural energy that came rushing at their faces. A blinding light shot out from under the ocean. If Wuxia had not confined the water with a restrictive spell, a tsunami of hundreds of miles high would have rolled up in this part of the ocean. The rock stratum at the bottom of the ocean, tens of thousands of miles in circumference, shattered with a deafening rumble. Tens of energy veins, connected from end to end, soared up into the sky. Hundreds of miles in diameter and tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of miles long energy veins soared into the sky, like tens of giant dragons. These energy veins were glinting with a strong light, and looked hazy and incorporeal. They were composed entirely of highly compressed natural energy and immortal energy. In the core of these energy veins, dozens of dragon-shaped shadows could be vaguely seen flashing. These were the cores of the underground energy veins, and it was these dragon veins that absorbed the natural energy, the power of the sun, the moon and the stars, transforming them into the energy veins hidden underground. A 5-colored divine light surged out of Princess Zhongli's body as she separated her palms and said softly, "Half each. Devour them quickly." Wuxia laughed and slapped the back of his head with his right hand. Immediately, a huge palm shrouded in a towering dark mist flew out and grabbed a few of the energy veins. Then, a beam of chaotic light shot out from between Wuxia's brows and swallowed the few energy veins. Suddenly, wisps of bright light shot out from the surface of Wuxia's body, and the interstitial world inside him went through a tremendous change. The few energy veins were sucked into his interstitial world, and were quickly absorbed and transformed by the chaotic energy. Wuxia's interstitial world expanded by more than 100 times, and the total amount of energy in the chaotic world skyrocketed by tens of thousands of times as well. The energy surged and rocked inside Wuxia's body, quickly transformed into chaotic energy, and filled all the meridians in Wuxia's body. The interstitial world of a gold immortal was the most important natal treasure of a gold immortal, just like the gene dan and nascent soul of a cultivator. The difference between a gold immortal with an interstitial world and a gold immortal without one was like the difference between an emperor and a beggar. Firstly, Having an interstitial world could help a gold immortal absorb natural energy to enhance his cultivation base, and it could increase the cultivation speed of a gold immortal by at least 10,000 times. Secondly, an interstitial world was a complete world. When a gold immortal was studying the great Tao of heaven and earth, he could simulate all the phenomena of the real world in his interstitial world, from which he could study the infinite mysteries. Therefore, a gold immortal who had an interstitial world could study the great Tao at least 10,000 times faster than an ordinary gold immortal. However, if he wanted his interstitial world to grow stronger, he would have to plunder a huge amount of natural energy to replenish himself. Relying on Wuqi's own cultivation, even if he worked hard for 10,000 years, he would not be able to expand his interstitial world by much. That was what most gold immortals did. Once they developed their interstitial world, they would immediately choose some remote planets, plunder all the energy veins on those planets, and add them into their interstitial world. A good energy vein was enough to save a gold immortal tens of thousands of years of hard work. What Wuqi was doing today was exactly the same as what those gold immortals did. But no matter how strong their backing was, no matter how powerful those gold immortals were, they would never plunder the energy veins of a planet where an immortal sect was stationed like Wuqi. It was a very illegal act. If it were not for the fact that Wuqi hated Patriarch Yuan Hua to the core, and wanted to completely destroy Yuan Hua sect's foundation, he would not have done such a ruthless thing. Wuqi's interstitial world was filled with chaotic energy. It seemed to contain everything, but at the same time, there was nothing in it. After Princess Zhonglu put the other half of the energy vein into her interstitial world, the foot-wide interstitial world suddenly expanded to about a mile in circumference. It was filled with green mountains, clear waters, lakes and rivers, and all kinds of natural sceneries. An abundance of natural energy was roiling in Princess Zhonglu's interstitial world. Gradually, natural phenomena such as wind, rain, thunder, and lightning began to take shape, and the cycle of the 4 seasons had begun in this small world. Under the control of Princess Zhonglu, the largest energy vein was being compressed and condensed high up in the sky, gradually forming into a ball of light the size of a sesame seed. The tiny ball of light radiated a great deal of light and heat, hanging in the sky like the sun, bringing the small world a vigorous life force. Princess Zhonglu laughed joyfully. She narrowed her eyes and pondered for a moment, then moved her fingers slightly. Suddenly, thunderbolts burst out from the interstitial world in her body, filling the void with countless electric arcs. Then, the thunderbolts in the interstitial world suddenly disappeared, and a thunderbolt, about 100 feet in diameter and 100 miles long, shot out from Princess Zhonglu's fingertip. It whistled through the air with a terrible rumble that nearly shattered the heaven and earth, smashing heavily onto a large island in the distance. A deafening boom rang out as the island, measuring 1,000 miles in circumference, was turned into nothingness amidst the thunderbolt. The terrible force of the thunderbolt instantly evaporated all the seawater within 10,000 miles, leaving a hole with a diameter of 10,000 miles in the vast ocean. With her interstitial world and enough natural energy, Princess Zhonglu could form all kinds of destructive energy storms in her interstitial world at any time, and then release them to attack her enemies in the outside world. With her interstitial world as the medium, the speed of casting spells was several times faster than that of ordinary immortal spells, and she could also control them more flexibly and freely. Wuqi was overjoyed when he saw Princess Zhonglu's astonishing strike. The quality of the energy veins they had extracted from this vast ocean was very high, and there was even an immortal energy vein among them, which had brought great benefits to their interstitial worlds. The dragon-shaped cores in these energy veins had fused with their interstitial worlds, allowing the natural energy to be extracted and absorbed by them at any time. They did not need to cultivate deliberately, and their interstitial worlds would automatically expand and enrich themselves. Their interstitial worlds operated on their own, no different from the outside world. All kinds of mysterious auras were faintly transmitted into their divine souls, making them feel that their divine souls had become transparent, and the world in front of them had become much clearer. They looked at each other and smiled happily. Then Wuqi put his arms around Princess Zhonglu's waist, puckered his lips, and pressed his lips against hers. Just as they were about to make out, Hundreds of sword beams came whistling over from a distance, and a female voice was heard coming from afar. "How dare you, evildoers! How dare you act so presumptuously on my green cliff planet? You are a bunch of bastards." At the moment, half of the energy veins on Green Cliff Planet were plundered by Wuxia and Princess Zhongli. Without them, all the natural energy would gradually dissipate, and all the land would gradually lose its vitality. On top of that, the loss of natural energy would inevitably affect the situation on the other half of Green Cliff Planet. It was a perfectly fine planet, but in fact, it had already entered a state of decline. Green Cliff Planet was the foundation of Yuanhua sect. How could the immortals of Yuanhua sect not be angry that the northern part of the planet had been plunged into such a state? The lady snapped, and hundreds of sword beams rained down on Wuqi and Princess Zhongli like raindrops. Chapter 636. Wuqi could not help but sneer as he watched several dozens of immortal items and several hundreds of spirit items, and even some lower-grade magical treasures coming down at him at the same time. After all, Yuanhua sect did not have a strong foundation. Although it had gained so many benefits, resources, and reputation, it did not have many artifact craftsmen. Perhaps, it could not even be self-sufficient in immortal items. Among the several hundred people in front of him, there were about 50 heaven immortals. Obviously, Yuanhua sect had recruited some itinerant immortals and annexed some small and medium-sized sects in the recent years. But the number of immortal items that came down from these 50 immortals was only about 30. It was a rather embarrassing situation. Grinning coldly, Wuqi waved his hand casually. Star Shark shot up into the sky, leaving behind a silver-green beam of starlight. Countless stars in the sky emitted a strong light at the same time, while wisps of starlight pierced into the blade like sharp needles. The shadow of a green dome shark, about 100 feet long, flashed across the sky, leaving behind a waterfall of light that stretched several miles long. Shrill cracking noises lingered in the air as several dozens of immortal items, hundreds of spirit items, and magical treasures were broken by Wuqi with just one sword strike. They exploded one after another, and the item spirits of immortal items and energies howled at the same time, sending sparks of various colors shooting in all directions. Bright sparks could be seen everywhere in the sky, as if countless fireworks were being set off. The colorful light illuminated the surface of the ocean, making it look very dazzling. The oncoming immortals and itinerant cultivators coughed up blood as they retreated. Some immortals with good eyesight cried out upper-grade immortal items in unison, their voices filled with fear and panic. An upper-grade immortal artifact. Only an upper-grade heaven immortal artifact could have such an overwhelming advantage over their immortal artifacts. How could an ordinary immortal or an ordinary immortal artifact destroy dozens of immortal artifacts with a single slash? It was a spectacular scene to see hundreds of Chi-Chi coughing blood. However, the people of Yuanhua sect, who were charging at them aggressively just a moment ago, were now dead silent. After a long while, a beautiful young woman clad in a long green dress drifted out slowly on a cloud. She forced a smile onto her face, bowed to Wuqi and Princess Zhongli, and said, "The entire Yuanhua sect is honored to have two seniors with your presence. May I know why the two seniors have come here?" Wuqi looked at this beautiful young woman, and gently shook his head. How could he not be familiar with this woman's appearance? She was Fairy Green Melon, Daoist Qi's Dao companion. It was only because Wuqi had offered a spirit herb that Fairy Green Melon could regain her peerlessly beautiful appearance. In the past, Wuqi and Goddess Green Melon had been friends. But because of Patriarch Yuanhua, they had become enemies when they met again. He reached out his hand and wiped his face, restoring his original appearance. Staring at Goddess Green Melon, he cried out in a deep voice, "Fellow immortal Green Melon, summon Patriarch Yuanhua. Patriarch Yuanhua of Yuanhua sect must give me an explanation for what happened in the past." Then he stretched his right hand out and clenched his fist. Abruptly, the ocean tens of thousands of miles in circumference soared up into the sky. A vast amount of seawater roared and rolled toward the center, then compressed at an incredible speed. Under the horrified gazes of Goddess Green Melon and all the members of Yuanhua sect, The vast ocean that stretched tens of thousands of miles in circumference, with the deepest depth of about 1,000 miles, was compressed into a acquired water in thunder the size of an egg in Wuqi's palm. Not to mention how much energy Wuqi had stored in this in thunder. The material used to refine it was the seawater of a vast ocean. Once the seawater exploded, the instantaneous impact would be more than enough to severely damage Green Cliff Planet, and any ordinary heaven immortals would be ripped to shreds by the aftershock of the explosion. Not to mention the fact that the in thunder had a faint black gleam flickering in it, and numerous runes were faintly visible on its surface. Clearly, Wuqi had condensed a magical thunder rune spell in it, which made the power of this in thunder even more immeasurable. On top of that, it only took Wuqi the span of 2 to 3 breaths to condense such a in thunder. Goddess Green Melon's eyes flickered, and she nearly fainted. She had once concocted some in thunders of the 5 elements. Although the water in thunder was not the thunder technique she was most proficient in, as it was good at restraining all kinds of fire elemental magic, she had also concocted some to protect herself. When she was concocting the in thunder of Gui water, she had to gather all the in water energy in the dark water cold pool, which was about 1 mile in circumference. It would take her 1 day and 1 night of hard work to compress it into a bean-sized in thunder seed. After that, she had to carefully carve the thunder talisman in it, inject her divine sense into it, and refine it with her natal true flame. Only then could she truly concoct a in thunder that could be activated at her will. A pond of water with a circumference of 1 kilometer would take her an entire day and night of hard work. Given her current cultivation base, she wouldn't be able to refine the water-in energy in this vast ocean of tens of thousands of kilometers in circumference without several periods of hard work. The fact that Wuqi could compress an ocean with just a wave of his hand showed that his cultivation base was not something an ordinary heaven immortal could compare with. Only an upper-tier heaven immortal, or even a top-tier heaven immortal, could have such a mighty power. On top of that, he had to have a very profound attainment in all kinds of thunder techniques and water manipulation techniques to be able to achieve such an unimaginable feat. Goddess Green Melon had once heard of the legend of refining an entire ocean into a in lightning orb. It was said that the core disciples of great immortal sects with gold immortals would use this in lightning orb to protect themselves when they ventured out. It could easily kill mid-grade heaven immortals and below. That was a gold immortal. Goddess Green Melon felt a stream of cold air rushing from the top of her head to the soles of her feet, swirling around the soles of her feet before rushing back to the top of her head. She shivered and stared at Wuqi, the smile on her face looking uglier than a crying face. Her lips trembled as she howled hysterically. "Wuqi? You can't be that little boy Wuqi. Why you? Oh heaven, the primordial gold talisman could not kill you. And now you can condense an ocean into a thunder? What kind of monster are you?" The divine gleam in her eyes was disordered, and white foam was spraying out of the corner of her mouth. Clearly, she had fallen into a state of half-madness. Immortal cultivators paid particular attention to gradual progress, and every bit of magic power and understanding of the heavenly Tao had to be cultivated painstakingly. Apart from some lucky fellows who had inherited the legacy of ancient fiends and cultivated quickly with the cruelest methods of the fiend Tao, who had ever heard of a monster who could cultivate to a realm like Wuqi in just a few years? When she thought of what Patriarch Yuan Hua had done to Wuqi, and what Patriarch Yuan Hua was doing now, Goddess Green Melon broke down on the spot. She waved her arms incoherently and rambled incessantly. All of a sudden, she untied a spirit beast bag from her belt, tore open the talisman seal on its opening, pointed at Wuqi and screamed, "Kill him! Kill him! Kill him! I'll let you go!" Wuqi looked at the spirit beast bag in surprise. Then he heard a phoenix cry, and a beam of red light rushed out of the bag. A huge bird flew out of the bag. It was about 10 feet long, fat like a bear that was about to hibernate. It looked exactly like a phoenix, but the aura emanating from it was mixed and impure. With sleepy eyes, the bird threw its head back and cried, "Woman, remember your promise. I'll kill him for you, but you have to let me go. I'll go find my master." At the sight of the bird, which was as fat as a ball, Wuqi and Princess Zhonglu burst into laughter at the same time. The bird was none other than Little Care. the descendant of the phoenix that Wuxia had bought from Green Cliff Immortal Market many years ago. When Princess Zhonglu fled Green Cliff Planet in a hurry, Goldhorn, Silverhorn, and the others had followed closely behind Princess Zhonglu. However, little Kair was very naughty, and did not leave with Princess Zhonglu at the critical moment. As a result, when Yuan Hua sect broke the island's defensive formation and seized the opportunity, she was imprisoned by Patriarch Yuan Hua with an immortal spell, and sent to Goddess Green Melon. Princess Zhonglu was delighted to see little Kair flying out of the island. She unleashed a beam of 5-colored divine ray, which instantly removed all the restrictive spells in little Kair's nascent divinity. Little Kair recognized Wuxia and Princess Zhonglu as well. She let out a wild cry of joy and rushed toward them in a beam of red light. Princess Zhonglu hugged little Kair, who had grown up a lot. She rubbed the feathers on her head and said with a smile, "You've learned how to speak now? You've improved a lot, little Kair." Little Kair let out a few long cries of joy. She rubbed her beak against Princess Zhonglu's cheek intimately, then stared at Wuxia with her big round eyes. Wuxia grinned and patted little Kair on the head. With a flip of his palm, he produced a supreme-grade fire element immortal stone, and gave it to little Kair. A joyful cry that shook the heaven and earth rang out of little Kair's mouth as she shrunk back to the size of a sparrow and hopped onto Princess Zhongli's shoulder. Beaming with joy, she spread her wings and held the fist-sized supreme-grade immortal stone in her arms. Ao Buzan poked his head out from Wuqi's sleeve. He gave little Kair a furtive glance, then suddenly grinned and said, "The bloodline of the phoenix? And a fledgling on top of that. TSK, this is the so-called heaven-sent marriage between a dragon and a phoenix. We are fated. How should I put it? Merciful Buddha, this is fate. Little girl, you and Lao Tzu are fated. In your previous life, you must have broken 108,000 wooden fishes before you could meet such an outstanding husband like Lao Tzu." Wuqia bowed his head and gave Ao Buzan a look, then shoved him back into his sleeve with a finger. Then he opened his mouth and inhaled. A frightening suction force was unleashed from the interstitial world inside Wuqi's body, sucking all the air, water, natural energy, sand, rocks, trees, flowers and grasses within several tens of thousands of miles into his mouth. Even Goddess Green Melon and the other disciples of Yuan Hua sect were swallowed into his interstitial world. Grinning coldly, Wuqia and Princess Zhonglu ran at top speed across Green Cliff Planet. Wherever they went, they dug up everything within 3,000 miles, leaving not even a single blade of grass behind. Apart from the mortals, all the cultivators, the palaces and pavilions, the beautiful mountains and rivers, the underground energy veins, the mines and even the herb gardens planted by the disciples of Yuan Hua sect were devoured by Wuqia into his grayish interstitial world. As vast as Green Cliff Planet was, the mortals were only left with an oasis and a small energy vein. These resources were more than enough for these mortals to live and multiply on Green Cliff Planet. However, Green Cliff Planet was completely cut off from cultivators. This barren planet could not support even a nascent divinity cultivator. Over the next few days, Wuqia and Princess Zhonglu traveled around. One by one, dozens of planets under Yuan Hua sect's jurisdiction were plundered by them, just like what they did to Green Cliff Planet. The planet with a huge energy stone vein, which Yuan Hua sect had fought for many years ago, was also plundered by both of them with mighty magic power, leaving not even a single lower-grade energy stone behind. After interrogating the disciples who stayed behind in Yuan Hua sect, and learning that Patriarch Yuan Hua was in a secluded cultivation with a group of elite disciples on Myriad Immortals planet, Wuqia and Princess Zhonglu immediately left for Myriad Immortals planet. Half a month later, Wuqia and Princess Zhonglu, who had plundered all the assets of Yuan Hua sect, arrived outside White Cloud planet in Minor Heavenly Circle realm. Chapter 637. Outside White Cloud Planet, numerous planetary ships were shuttling back and forth in the void like a meteor shower. Some of them flew into the planet's atmosphere, while some left the planet and flew into the distant starry sky. Every hour, there would be dozens of planetary ships flying in and out of the planet. Judging by the busy traffic, White Cloud Immortal sect must have turned the planet into a transportation and trading hub in Minor Heavenly Circle realm, relying on the power of Yuan Hua sect. Hovering in the void, Wuqi's divine will had enveloped the entire planet. Countless data poured into him like a tidal wave. Wuqi had digested all the hundreds of millions of evil spirits he had absorbed on Pangu continent. At the moment, his divine soul was extraordinarily powerful, allowing him to easily analyze all the data that poured into him. In just a blink of an eye, everything on White Cloud Planet was under his control. In the past, there were many dynasties living side by side in the mortal world. But today, the planet had been unified by a certain dynasty. The capital of this dynasty was built at the foot of White Cloud Peak, and its name was Yuanhua. The surname of the imperial family was Zi, and the current emperor possessed the cultivation base of early-stage Jindan realm. Clearly, it was a dynasty built by the descendants of Patriarch Yuanhua. The emperor, who sat on the dragon throne and handled the affairs of the state, had an extremely poor aptitude. Logically speaking, it was impossible for him to cultivate to the realm of Jindan. As the Jindan in his body was very impure, it was obvious that he was forcibly condensed with some medicinal pills or external force. When Wuqi scanned the imperial palace with his divine will, the emperor, who was called Purple Moon Fox, was counting the number of ores and energy stones mined in the past half a year with his courtiers, preparing to hand them over to White Cloud Peak. Those who guarded White Cloud Peak were some people Wuqi was very familiar with. Their leader was Immortal Greenstaff, who had brought a few heaven immortals and several dozens of nascent divinity cultivators to guard White Cloud Peak. In front of the mountain was the imperial capital of Yuanhua dynasty, and behind the mountain was a large immortal market, where tens of thousands of cultivators and immortals were trading. The market was bustling with people, and there were at least tens of thousands of shops in it. It was even livelier than Green Cliff Immortal Market on Green Cliff Planet. Laughing, Wuqi was about to rush into White Cloud Planet, and use the method he had used on Green Cliff Planet when his expression changed abruptly. On the White Cloud Planet, in a house in a remote town, a group of fierce-looking men dressed in crimson brocade clothes were attacking a group of less than 20 people with weapons in their hands. There were about 300 to 400 men in embroidered robes, each of them wearing soft armor underneath their embroidered robes. There were about 100 of them with crossbows in their hands, and they had already surrounded the entire courtyard so tightly that not even a drop of water could trickle through. The others held their swords and sabers in their hands as they charged forward like an endless tide, killing the less than 20 strong men, and forcing them to retreat step by step. They were about to rush into a small building that these strong men were guarding. Wuqi focused all of his divine sense on this small town in an instant. His tremendous divine sense caused the surrounding spiritual energy to become chaotic. Clouds fluttered in the sky, strong winds blew all around, and muffled sounds of thunder came from the distant horizon. The strong wind rolled up sand and grass and drowned the entire small town. The sand and rocks in the storm were like arrows hitting and shattering the roof tiles. Every household hastily closed their doors and windows, and no one dared to walk outside. The strong wind made the men in embroidered robes lose their footing, and some of them were sent flying into the air, slamming into the surrounding walls and trees. The embroidered clothed men's formation was thrown into disarray. The sturdy men, who numbered less than 20, hastily reorganized their ranks. They firmly guarded the door of the small building behind them. The strong wind stirred up by Wuqi was extremely strange. One after another, those men in embroidered robes cried out in a disorderly manner, but no one knew what they were yelling about. By the time the black wind blew past the courtyard with a whistling sound, Wuqi was holding Princess Zhongli's hand and standing firmly in the courtyard. Coiled around Wuqi's neck, Ao Buzin was winking at little Kair, who was standing blankly on Princess Zhongli's shoulder. A man, a woman, a dragon, and a phoenix. It was a very strange combination. The strong wind stopped abruptly, and those men in embroidered robes stared blankly at Wuqi and his company. Their leader, a burly man who stood over 10 feet tall and held a sawtooth scythe in his hand, frowned as he strode forward, cupped his fist and bowed to Wuqi. "Seniors, we are the embroidered imperial guards of Yuanhua Heavenly Dynasty, and we have been ordered by His Majesty to hunt down the leaders of the rebels, Li Yifeng, Zi Qianyan, and the pair of bastards. Please do not interfere in the internal affairs of Yuanhua Heavenly Dynasty." After a brief pause, The burly man fished out a jade tablet from his waist and flashed it. He injected a shallow stream of energy into the jade tablet. Immediately, a large cloud of white smoke sprayed out from the jade tablet. The white smoke slowly wheeled around the burly man, giving this stout and burly man, whose face was filled with a fierce and murderous aura, an air of immortality. White Cloud Immortal Sect of White Cloud Planet is Yuanhua Heavenly, he said proudly. Wuxia interrupted the burly man with the most direct action. He patted Ao Buzan on the head, then pointed a finger at the burly man. Ao Buzan followed Wuxia's advice, opened his mouth and swallowed. A plume of dark mist sprayed out from his mouth and enveloped the burly man. A cry of alarm rang out as the burly man was sucked into Ao Buzan's small mouth by the dark mist. Ao Buzan closed his mouth and chewed slowly. Cracking noises of bones breaking could be heard coming from Ao Buzan's mouth, and blood was dripping down from the corner of Ao Buzan's mouth. The burly men in embroidered robes were so frightened that their legs turned soft. They had never seen such a cruel scene before. A living person was actually swallowed by a monster that looked like a black snake in one bite? How could this small body, which was only 2 feet long, swallow a burly man who was more than 10 feet tall? The few burly men in embroidered robes cried out with twisted faces, "Monster! Monster! Quickly get the immortal masters to help us!" A stream of flame towered high into the sky, exploding several tens of miles above the ground. A crisp sound rang out, and a white light sphere, about 1 mile in circumference, exploded. The light was so bright that it could be seen clearly by all the people within several hundred miles. Not long after that, a few white beams could be seen flashing amidst the clouds in the distant sky. After that, tens of sword beams pierced through the clouds, flying towards the small town at top speed. Wuxia smiled coldly. These cultivators were just putting on an act. When he scanned the small town with his divine will, Wuxia found that both Li Yifeng and Zi Qianyan were seriously wounded and could not even move. These cultivators were too proud and arrogant to deal with 2 seriously wounded men, so they sent these burly men to capture them. Now that Ao Buzan had swallowed the burly man, the others had sent out an urgent warning message, and only then did these cultivators rush over in a hurry. With a smile on his face, Wuxia opened his mouth and shot out a beam of chaotic spirit light. One after another, the burly men in embroidered robes near the house flew up into the sky with strange cries, then were pulled into Wuxia's interstitial world. Inside the chaotic interstitial world, a large amount of natural energy gathered and transformed into ancient divine runes that represented the meaning of suppression, imprisonment, and slumber, firmly branded on the brows of these burly men. Before they could see where they were, they had already fallen into a deep sleep. Without Wuxia's help, they would never wake up again. These men, together with those from Yuanhua sect captured on Green Cliff Planet, would be brought back to Panga Continent by Wuxia for a blood sacrifice. The target of the sacrifice would be Lei Meng, who had promised to become the ancestral god of East Sea County. Currently, Wuxia had a small influence in East Sea County. Although he had 50,000 soldiers under his command, their overall strength was very weak. If he wanted to use them, he would have to hold several dozens of large-scale blood sacrifices. When they saw Wuxia spew out a bright beam from his mouth and swallowed all the burly men into his stomach, the dozens of cultivators in the sky thought that Wuxia was some demon or devil cultivator, and that he had devoured all of them. A handsome young man in a white robe with a cultivation base of peak stage nascent soul realm snapped, "How dare you, evildoer!" Then Chi-Chi pointed his finger at the cultivators, and a dozen sword beams mixed with some lower-grade spirit items and magical treasures came smashing down from above. Wuxia gave a cold snort. Suddenly, 6 green fiend shadows emerged from his body, and the 6 celestial fiend puppets flew up into the sky while howling. When the sword beams, spirit items, and magical treasures fell on them, they were immediately sucked into their bodies. These celestial fiend puppets could devour all kinds of ores to strengthen themselves, and these flying swords and magical treasures that had been refined with the right method were the best tonic for them. After the flying swords and magical treasures were devoured by the puppets, Wuxia once again breathed out a large sheet of spirit light from his mouth. The dozen of cultivators who did not have the time to register their names had their vision blacked out and lost their sense of direction. They were then sucked into Wuqi's interstitial world and suppressed with ancient divine runes. After dealing with all these imperial guards and cultivators with ease, Wuqi turned and looked at the dozens of burly men who were still standing at the entrance of the building. Their bodies were covered in blood, yet they refused to retreat. Wuqi nodded his head in admiration. After scanning these burly men with his divine will, Wuqi said in a deep voice, "You are a group of loyal men who know how to be grateful to you. You will be rewarded with good fortune in the future." Although they were facing opponents who were dozens of times stronger than them, they still fought to the death despite being severely wounded. These burly men were very loyal and useful. All of them had practiced some superficial cultivation techniques, and the strongest among them was only at the level of peak stage Xiantian realm. It was not a pity to cripple their cultivation base. Therefore, Wuqi planned to let them practice the true body of heaven and earth scripture, and then hold a blood sacrifice to improve their overall strength. When they saw Wuqi walking toward the building, these burly men raised the weapons in their hands at the same time. A burly man, who had his face slashed twice and a row of his teeth broken, howled with a hoarse voice, "Halt! My emperor's temporary quarters are here, and no one is allowed to come close." Looking at the ordinary two-storied building made of green bricks, Wuqi suddenly burst into a loud laughter. "Li Yifeng Ziqianyan, you do have a group of good subordinates." Wuqi laughed aloud. With a shake of his Taoist robe, the building crumbled to pieces. Li Yifeng and Ziqianyan, who were lying on a soft couch in the building, flew up into the air along with the strong wind. Before those burly men could see what was happening, they had already landed right next to Wuqi, and Wuqi had his palms pressed on their backs. These burly men, who had been fleeing with Li Yifeng and Ziqianyan for years, roared in terror. Then they raised their weapons and charged toward Wuqi desperately. Wuqi chuckled, while Li Yifeng cried out in wild joy, "Stand down, all of you." Ziqianyan even burst into tears. "Master, you have to seek justice for us disciples," she said as she wept. Those burly men were taken aback, but soon they threw down their weapons happily, dropped to their knees and kowtowed. Princess Zhonglu waved her hand without batting an eyelid. A beam of five-colored divine rays sprinkled down and landed on these severely wounded burly men. Chapter 638. The main hall of the former imperial palace of Gutai dynasty was brightly lit. All the doors and windows of the hall were open, and the bright light shone into the distance for miles. Li Yifeng and Ziqianyan sat on the thrones in the center of the hall, while several hundred people stood around Qiqi. Some of them were dressed in rags like beggars, and some were dressed in green clothes and hats like commoners. None of them were dressed in luxurious clothes. They were the ministers of Gutai dynasty in the past. 3 years ago, Yuanhua Heavenly Dynasty swept across White Cloud Planet, completely destroying many dynasties in just half a month. It was as if Mount Tai was pressing down on them, and it caught everyone by surprise. Li Yifeng and Ziqianyan had fled with a pair of twins and several hundred loyal guards. As for the other civil and military officials of Gutai dynasty, some were dead, some surrendered, and some had fled. Currently, only these several hundred loyal officials could be summoned by Li Yifeng and Ziqianyan, who had the courage to pay a visit to Gutai dynasty's forbidden palace in the middle of the night. It was obvious that these former ministers of Gutai dynasty had not been living a good life in the past 3 years. Their properties were seized by others, and some even had their private houses occupied. They had no choice but to bring their families and become homeless. They were no different from refugees. Apart from a few lucky ones who managed to find a way to make a living, the rest were living a miserable life. Wuqi was standing next to Li Yifeng's throne, with Li Yifeng and Ziqianyan's children nestled on each side. The two little dolls were not very old, having just passed their 5th birthday. They were so pink and tender that they looked like a pair of dolls made of silver. They were very likable. While pinching the cheeks of the two babies, Wuqi looked at the several hundred officials in the hall with a smile on his face. His heart was bursting with joy. 50% of the high-ranking officials and nobles of Gutai dynasty had surrendered, and the other 50 were killed in the disaster. The remaining few hundred loyal officials were the middle and lower-ranked officials in the imperial court, and they were the officers in charge of various ministries and departments. To put it bluntly, they were all talented people who could do practical things. What Wuxia lacked right now was talents. As a vast EC county, with a land area several times the size of the entire White Cloud planet, there were many things that needed people to take care of. By bringing these people to Panga continent, Wuxia would have a group of administrative talents who could do practical things, and he could also bring Li Yifeng and Zi Qianyan, the two chief administrative officers. Was there anything more worthwhile than this? Wuxia even had some evil thoughts in his mind. Should he recruit a few more emperors from outer heavenly realms as his disciples, and secretly sponsor their enemies to destroy his dynasty in a few years? Then he would avenge his disciples, and after infinitely increasing their loyalty, he would bring these emperors' disciples and their subordinates to Panga continent. After that, he would bring them to Panga continent. It seemed that this matter could really be done, but he had to be very careful. It would be ugly if he gave himself away. Putting aside the absurd idea for the time being, Wuxia gave Li Yifeng a look. Li Yifeng was still immersed in his excitement when Wuxia descended from the sky like a divine soldier a few hours ago, rescuing him, his wife, his son, and the last loyal guard. Seeing Wuxia giving him a meaningful look, Li Yifeng took a deep breath and cried out in a deep voice, "My subjects, are there any old ministers of Gutai who have not arrived yet?" The ministers in the great hall exchanged glances, then fell to their knees at the same time and bowed to Li Yifeng and Zi Qianyan. "Your Majesty," said a high-ranking civil official who was in charge of Gutai dynasty's sacrificial ceremony in the past. "Your Majesty, apart from those rebels and traitors who defected to Yuan Hua's puppet dynasty, all the people who were able to come are here." Li Yifeng breathed a deep sigh and looked at Wuxia with a complicated expression. Wuxia nodded slowly and said gently, "You are all loyal ministers of Yifeng. Since you did not betray Yifeng this time, I will definitely give you some benefits. I will give you 1 day to gather all your people and loyal and reliable subordinates. After that, I will bring you to a good place." After pondering for a moment, Wuxia nodded and said, "In that place, each of you will be of great use, and the benefits you can get will far exceed your imagination." Suddenly, muffled footsteps could be heard coming from afar, as a great number of lanterns and torches formed into a flaming dragon and rushed toward the great hall. Following it were the hoarse shouts of generals, and the grunts of soldiers who responded to the orders given by the generals. Judging from the noises, there were at least 100,000 soldiers surrounding the imperial palace from all directions. Moreover, several tens of thousands of soldiers had already rushed into the palace, and were coming toward the great hall. Wuxia looked at Li Yifeng with a smile and said, "Are these your armies?" Li Yifeng rose to his feet, bowed respectfully to Wuxia and said, "Master, you can do whatever you want with me." Clenching his teeth tightly, Li Yifeng said fiercely, "All the generals and soldiers who were loyal to me have died a long time ago. The ones who are still safe and sound here are either the soldiers of Yuan Hua dynasty, or the rebels who betrayed me and joined the enemy. Master, you can do whatever you want with them." Wuxia smiled, nodded, and said, "That's good. I happen to be short of people." Laughing loudly, Wuxia opened his mouth and sprayed out a great sheet of chaotic energy, which instantly enveloped the entire territory of Gutai dynasty. Countless officials and soldiers in cities, villages, and towns, as long as they were serving Yuan Hua dynasty, could not help but fly thousands of miles into Wuqi's mouth while letting out strange cries. All of them were imprisoned in the interstitial world, and suppressed by Wuxia with the primordial divine rune. Wuxia could not do something like abducting mortals and sacrificing them, for he was not a ruthless and unscrupulous immortal of the Fiend League. But when it came to these people who had betrayed his disciple and served his disciple's enemy, Wuxia had every reason to kill them, and he would not feel any burden on his conscience. Amidst the energy, countless figures could be seen wailing as they flew into Wuqi's mouth. In just a few breaths of time, all the officials, soldiers, and even their families in the territory of Gutai dynasty were imprisoned in Wuqi's interstitial world. The total number of them might have exceeded 1 million. Not a single one of the armies gathered outside the great hall was left behind. The rumbling footsteps disappeared abruptly, and the sudden silence made all the courtiers in the great hall shiver as if they were in a nightmare. Li Yifeng cried out joyfully, "Master's mighty divine ability!" Zi Qianyan and all the courtiers bowed and worshipped Wu Qi. None of them had ever seen such a mighty divine ability before. Even though some of the members of Gutai dynasty's imperial clan were disciples of White Cloud Immortal sect, the strongest among them was merely at the nascent soul realm. How could they have the almighty divine ability like Wu Qi? For the next 24 hours, Wu Qi asked Ao Buzan to stay by Li Yifeng's side to protect the courtiers and military officers of Gutai dynasty as they gathered their people. Within these 24 hours, several hundred courtiers had gathered several tens of thousands of their people. And some of the family members of some courtiers who were killed in the calamity had come to join Li Yifeng as well. Naturally, Li Yifeng did not reject any of these loyal subordinates, and recruited all of them into his team. Wu Qi made it very clear that he was in need of manpower at the moment, and as long as they could work, he would take them in as long as they could read and write. At least, the family members of these courtiers were literate since they were young, and they had some basic administrative abilities. They were much better than the people on Pangu continent, who were still in a state of chaos and simplicity. Even the servants of these courtiers were very familiar with all kinds of affairs, and could lead a few ordinary people to do many things. During the 24 hours, Wu Qi and Princess Zhonglu followed the usual practice on Green Cliff Planet, looting 99% of the energy veins on White Cloud Planet, leaving only a small energy vein that stretched 10,000 miles long for the common people on White Cloud Planet. All the other mines were looted as well, and some famous sceneries were moved into Princess Zhongli's world in the ring, without leaving a single one of them. It was not only natural resources, mountains, rivers, and the like, but Wu Qi and Princess Zhonglu would never let go of those extraordinarily gorgeous palaces and pavilions wherever they went. Imperial cities were uprooted one after another, and magnificent manors belonging to the nobles had disappeared without a trace. With a little modification, these imperial cities and manors could be transformed into a magnificent Taoist Rite temple. It would save Wu Qi a lot of time and effort. Apart from these things, there were also some isolated villages deep in the mountains and forests of White Cloud Planet. The villagers were simple and honest, and did not know much about the affairs of the world. Wu Qi did not hesitate to kill all the villagers in these isolated villages. There were about 1 million of them in total. These people could be used to replenish the population of East Sea County. The villagers were simple and honest, which made them easy to control. If it were those shrewd and cunning people in the cities, Wu Qi would not dare to let them go to Pangu continent. If they were not careful enough, Wu Qi might leak his secret. After a day and a night of looting, Wu Qi and Princess Zhonglu had almost emptied White Cloud Planet. When the few continents on the planet could no longer find anything good, Wu Qi and Princess Zhonglu rushed to White Cloud Peak with a murderous look on their faces. They took the lead in looting all the shops and businesses in the immortal market, and also moved several thousand cultivators who did not manage to escape into their interspatial world. As Wu Qi and Princess Zhonglu plundered everything on White Cloud Planet, they had caused the natural energies to become extremely chaotic, and caused countless earthquakes and other natural disasters. Those immortals and cultivators who had nothing to do with Yuan Hua sect had long since left the planet. Naturally, those who were still in the immortal market were the loyal disciples of Yuan Hua sect. As there was no need to reason with these cultivators, Wu Qi simply abducted all the people in the immortal market and brought them away. Just as Wu Qi and Princess Zhonglu were about to go to the capital city of Yuan Hua dynasty and abduct all the people in it, Immortal Green Staff, who was standing on a green cloud with a complicated expression on his face, stopped before Wu Qi with a group of immortals from Yuan Hua sect. Arm in arm, Wu Qi and Princess Zhonglu looked at Immortal Green Staff with a cold grin on their faces. Clenching his jaws tightly, Immortal Green Staff stared fixedly at Wu Qi from head to toe. After a full 15 minutes, he opened his mouth and was about to say something. But right when he opened his mouth, Wu Qi sprinkled a beam of bright light, abducting Immortal Green Staff and all the people behind him. "I'm not here to reason with you." Looking at the capital city of Yuan Hua dynasty that had fallen into chaos, Wu Qi said in a ferocious voice, "I'm here to seek revenge. Immortal Green Staff, you owe me. I, Wuxia, have never done anything wrong to Yuanhua sect. With a casual point of his finger, the entire capital city of Yuanhua dynasty was uprooted from the ground, together with a layer of rock several hundred miles in circumference, and was imprisoned in Wuqia's interstitial world. Next, it was Myriad Immortals Planet's turn. Chapter 639. Myriad Immortals Planet. Myriad Immortals Planet, which used to be full of vitality, was now nearly empty, except for the deep forests, deep ponds and valleys, and the bottomless trenches in the vast ocean. Except for some lucky demons and ghosts hiding in these perilous places, all the other creatures had been turned into white bones. The former capital of Great Yanji City had sunk hundreds of miles into the ground and turned into a deep pit 10,000 miles in circumference. Countless corpses were piled up at the edge of the pit, and a great amount of blood flowed out from them, filling the pit to the brim. The land hundreds of thousands of miles in circumference was covered with mountains of corpses and seas of blood, and not even an inch of land could be seen. Among the corpses there were not only human skeletons, but also the skeletons of countless wild beasts, birds, fishes, and even inch-long shrimps, 3-centimeter-long centipedes, half-foot-long green snakes, and caterpillars the size of fingers. Countless living beings were piled up here. Some had turned into bones, some were half-rotten, and some had just been killed. Blood of various colors was constantly oozing out of their bodies and flowing into the huge pit. High up in the sky, dark clouds were pressing down. They were only about 1,000 feet above the ground, and the dark clouds were 100 miles thick, with a radius of hundreds of thousands of miles. It was as if the distance between the sky and the ground was only this short. This part of the world gave people an extremely oppressive feeling. From time to time, a blood-red light and a devil flame would flash across the dark clouds. The red blood-red light and the green devil flame would make a whistling sound as they swept across the sky, bringing with them a pungent smell of blood. In this hellish land, there were no flies, vultures, wild dogs, maggots, or those creatures that liked to live on the corpses. Because all the living beings, including the flies, vultures, wild dogs, and maggots, had been killed and turned into a part of this sea of corpses and seas of blood. Oh heavens! Open your eyes. Are you really going to wipe out this branch of mine? Amidst a long, forlorn howl, a pitch-black flying sword soared into the sky and chopped off the head of a longbow man, who stood 1,000 feet tall. A thick column of blood sprayed hundreds of feet away, pouring into the huge pool of blood. Tiny bubbles rose and rose in the viscous blood pool, as if it had happily received the new blood. The one who let out the long, forlorn howl was an old longbow man, whose skin was cracked like pine bark, and who was only one breath away from death. The old man stood hundreds of feet tall, holding a wooden staff in his hand, throwing his head back and howling wildly. The corners of his eyes were cracked, and some faint traces of blood slid down his cheeks. There were no tears or blood flowing out of them. The old man was so old that his bodily functions had dried up, and there was not much blood left in him. He was so old that his bodily functions had dried up, and there was not even much blood left in him. Next to the old man, about 50 to 60,000 longbow men were lined up in neat rows, stepping over the bodies of their people that piled up like a small hill as they walked step by step towards the huge pool of blood. As long as they were within 30 feet of the blood pool, the flying sword would spiral down and behead them. The old man kept howling and howling, but the heaven was speechless, and no one answered his howl. The eyes of those longbow men were clear, and their faces were filled with anger and fear. They knew exactly what was happening around them, but they could not control their own bodies. An evil force had taken control of them, forcing them to walk slowly toward the pool of blood. These longbow men were the last remaining people on Myriad Immortals Planet. When the sudden attack came, the people of Longbow Kingdom, who possess formidable overall strength, woke up a few slumbering elders in their clan. Working together, those elders who possessed the cultivation base of Heaven Immortals defeated the enemies who spied on them over and over again. However, the repeated battles drained the strength of these old men, drained their blood essence, and the enemies that attacked them became stronger and stronger. When the last elder was killed by the enemy with an upper-grade immortal sword that emanated a scorching heat, the longbow men, like the rest of the people on Myriad Immortals Planet, came to this nightmarish place, walking step by step toward death. The old man who was howling into the sky was the last oracle of the longbowmen on Myriad Immortal's planet. Watching his people being killed one after another, and the souls of all his people not being able to ascend to heaven, but being sent into the blood pool together with their blood, the old oracle knew what the enemy was trying to do, and that his clan had reached a critical moment of life and death. Burning his own soul, he broke free from the evil force that imprisoned him. He threw his head back and let out a long howl, trying to seek help from the ghosts and deities in the world to save his people. The heaven was speechless, and the ghosts and deities were at a loss for words. In the land shrouded by dark clouds, not a single ghost or deity responded to the old oracle's call. Tens of thousands of longbowmen who were lucky enough to survive burst into tears at the same time. They wept bitterly for the death of their own people, for their own fate, and at the same time, for the imminent extinction of their own longbow people. Among the tens of thousands of human races, longbowmen were perhaps the most united, traditional, conservative, and stubborn human race. Among the human race, only longbowmen never attacked their own people. All longbowmen were as close as brothers. Although they were divided into different tribes, all longbowmen were united. When they saw their people being brutally slaughtered, the hearts of all the longbowmen who were still alive were broken. Tears of blood rolled down their cheeks, and the deafening cries even raised the dark clouds in the sky tens of feet high. A strange laughter was heard coming from a distance. The flying swords that were flying at high speed in the sky suddenly stopped moving, and a blood-red cloud descended from the sky. Clad in a black Taoist robe with a white skull embroidered on the chest, Patriarch Yuan Hua held an immortal sword that was emitting scorching flames in his hand. Laughing wildly, he flew towards the longbowmen on the blood-red cloud. "Why are you crying? Why are you crying?" Patriarch Yuan Hua shook his head and said with a smile, "You are the only one left on this planet, and you can die together with all the living beings on this planet. What are you unhappy about? After you die, you can turn into my immortal energy and help me break through the realm of Gold Immortal. What are you unhappy about?" Pointing triumphantly at the pool of blood, Patriarch Yuan Hua laughed wildly and said, "With the help of this pool of blood, I have a great hope of breaking through the realm of Gold Immortal with my blood seize technique." A blood-red gleam flashed in Patriarch Yuan Hua's eyes as he frowned and said, "Strange. Why do I know the blood seize technique? Why do I know how to build a pool of blood? Who am I? Am I Patriarch Yuan Hua? No. Am I Lord Blood Ocean? Wrong. Am I the ancient celestial fiend, Li Xuezi? No. Who am I?" After tilting his head and pondering for a while, Patriarch Yuan Hua suddenly slapped himself on the head and said with a strange laugh, "Why do I care so much? Once I have cultivated the great Tao of Gold Immortal, Senior has promised that an emissary will come to welcome me and make me his disciple." Back then, Senior's promise was worth 1,000 gold. After working hard for so many years, Old Ancestor finally has the opportunity to enter Senior's tutelage. Looking triumphantly at the longbow people who were crying bitterly in front of him, Patriarch Yuan Hua shook his head and suddenly burst out laughing. After that, he suddenly paused. He spun a few times on the spot, then suddenly beckoned at the dark cloud above him. A blood-red cloud burst out from the dark cloud, measuring about 1 acre in circumference, shrouded in a green ghost flame. Several dozens of stone pillars were placed in a straight line on top of the cloud, each of them carved with countless images of evil ghosts. Patriarch Jiang Yun, his 2 wives Qing Xia and Bai Wu, the 3 old Taoists Qing Xian, Qing Yi and Qing Shen, together with a group of core disciples from White Cloud Immortal Sect and Tranquil Vimla Sect, were all tied up on the stone pillars. Their 7 apertures were locked by the ghost flame that shot out from the evil ghost skulls engraved on the stone pillars, and they could not move or speak. Patriarch Yuan Hua flew up to Patriarch Jiang Yun with a smile on his face and said, "Jiang Yun, you are my disciple. Obey me and kill the rest of these longbow people with your own hands. When I attain the great Tao of Gold Immortal, you will also get a share of the benefits." With a wave of his hand, Patriarch Yuan Hua removed the ghost flames from Patriarch Jiang Yun's face and asked, "Are you willing to obey me?" Patriarch Jiang Yun, whose eyes were flickering and on the verge of a mental breakdown, stared blankly at Patriarch Yuan Hua for a long time. Suddenly he howled at the top of his voice. No, no, no. Even if I have to die, I'll never obey you, you fiend. You are not Patriarch Yuan Hua. You are a fiend from some foreign domain. You are Old Demon Blood Ocean. You are a beast. You have killed everyone on Myriad Immortals planet. Patriarch Yuan Hua frowned. He slapped Patriarch Jiang Yin in the face and scolded in a low voice. You ungrateful fool. I've only killed a few people. Of course, I am Patriarch Yuan Hua. Otherwise, who am I? Old Demon Blood Ocean? TSK. Why does this name sound so familiar? Is it me? Not me. Who is that ancient celestial fiend, Li Xuezi? My master. Am I Li Xuezi's personal disciple? After muttering to himself for a while, Patriarch Yuan Hua shook his head, sighed and said, Why do you care so much? I am me? Of course I am me. With a cold snort, Patriarch Yuan Hua turned to look at Qing Xian, Qing Yi, and Qing Shen, then said with a smile, If Jiang Yin doesn't obey me, neither will you. Qing Xian, Qing Shen, and Qing Yi could not move or speak, but their eyes shone with a bright gleam, filled with a determination that they would rather die than submit. Patriarch Yuan Hua shook his head. He did not want to waste his energy to undo the restrictive spells on their faces, so he just sighed deeply and said, You refuse to take the path of life, but insist on taking the path of death. Are the so-called morality and justice really that important? As he spoke, Patriarch Yuan Hua suddenly burst into wild laughter. With one swift motion, he tore open Bai Wu and Qing Xia's corsets and said, Excellent. Why do you care so much? I'm going to be a gold immortal, and I'm going to attain the righteous fruit of a gold immortal. Heh, Jiang Yin, oh Jiang Yin, let me have a good time with your two Dao companions. Since you are determined to die anyway, let me enjoy them before you die, so that I won't waste two beauties. Bai Wu and Qing Xia's faces fell dramatically, while Patriarch Jiang Yin twisted and struggled frantically. Patriarch Yuan Hua, you are an old beast who is worse than a pig or a dog. You are not a human. He snapped. The roar was so loud that it tore Patriarch Jiang Yin's vocal cords, causing blood to spray out of his mouth. Laughing evilly, Patriarch Yuan Hua grabbed Bai Wu and was about to push her onto the blood cloud. Chapter 640. After the time it took to finish a pot of tea, Wuxia and Princess Zhonglu walked out from a secret cave abode located in the depths of Meng Mountains. This cave abode was one of the secret abodes Wuxia had prepared for himself many years ago, and it was a hiding place for Wuxia in case he needed to flee for his life. The cave abode was protected by a formation laid out by Wuxia to conceal his aura. Although his cultivation base was not strong at that time, and the power of the formation was not strong, it was more than enough to conceal one's aura. Meng Mountains was so vast that ordinary heaven immortals could never search every inch of it with their divine will. Therefore, a mere cave abode of several hundred feet in circumference could still be perfectly hidden, and was not damaged in any way. Right after they walked out from the cave abode, the faces of Wuqi and Princess Zhonglu fell instantly. Ao Buzin had long squeezed out from Wuqi's chest, and was standing on Wuqi's shoulder in a daze. Even little Kair, who had been standing on Princess Zhongli's shoulder and digesting the immortal stone given to her by Wuqi a few days ago, raised her head in astonishment, and kept chirping uneasily. Wuqi had once read an ancient poem. It described the scene of no birds flying over 1,000 mountains, no traces of men left on 10,000 paths. It described the scene of no birds and no men left after a heavy snowfall. Although no birds could be seen in such a desolate mountain after a heavy snowfall, at least a few bird chirps could be heard, and there were at least some fishes leaping in the river next to the fishermen on the boat. But at this moment, Meng Mountains was in a dead silence. No one could be seen on the empty mountain, and no fish could be seen in the green water. Not even the sound of insects could be heard from the bushes under the trees. All kinds of plants such as flowers, grass and trees could be seen, but not a single animal could be found. Wuqi, Princess Zhonglu, Ao Buzin, and little Kair spread out their divine will at the same time. In just a flash, Wuqi and Princess Zhonglu had covered the entire Meng Mountains with their divine will, but what they saw made their faces turn pale. There were no humans, no beasts, no birds, no fishes. Meng Mountains was the paradise of all demons. But at this moment, not a single demon could be found in all the valleys and valleys of Meng Mountains. The cave abodes of the few demon kings in Meng Mountains had been burned down into a shabby cave, and a few mountains were pressed down into the ground by some mighty magic. A few years ago, when Yen Dan left Myriad Immortal's planet with his subordinates, the 5 demon kings of Great Yen had also left with most of their trusted subordinates. But they were reluctant to abandon their cave abodes which they had managed for thousands of years, so they left many demons to guard them in the mountains. But now, it seemed that their cave abodes were destroyed, and the demons and fiends under their command were naturally unfortunate. From its source all the way to its estuary, Wuxia carefully scanned every inch of Longyuan River with his divine will. However, the water was completely clean. Apart from countless aquatic plants rolling and writhing in the water, not even a single shrimp could be found. The once bustling and powerful aquatic clan of Longyuan River was completely gone. Even the spirit tapeworm river, which had given Wuxia a very deep impression, the countless spirit-sucking tapeworms that gave him goosebumps when he thought about them, had vanished completely. Meng Mountains, a vast mountain that stretched for tens of millions of miles, was now completely devoid of any living creature. Wrong, it was not that there were no living creatures. Those flowers, grass, and trees were still alive, but all the animals were gone. Wuxia had dug 300 miles deep into the ground with his divine will, but even in the deepest underground cave, there were no living creatures. The fishes and shrimps that lived in the dark rivers in the depths of the earth had also vanished without a trace, and the earthworms and worms that lived in the mud layer were gone as well. What is going on? Wuxia turned to look at Princess Zhonglu in astonishment. Princess Zhongli's face was extremely unsightly as well. Suddenly, she closed her eyes and walked to a 10,000-years-old tree with a trunk so wide that it would take at least 100 men to wrap their arms around it. She pressed both hands on the trunk of the tree, and from her palms, a faint greenish divine ray was injected into the trunk. The huge ancient tree began to sway even though there was no wind. Its branches were waving happily, and its leaves were rustling noisily, as if there were countless tiny mouths talking at the same time. Wuxia looked at all this with a blank expression. It was an art of psychic communication taught to him by Princess Zhonglu, but he just could not learn it no matter how hard he tried. He could barely communicate with those Yin spirits and wild ghosts, but when it came to communicating with these flowers and trees, Wuxia just could not figure out the principle behind it. On the contrary, Princess Zhonglu did not need any practice at all. When her bloodline was awakened, she naturally possessed this divine ability. Fire, monstrous flame. Huge flying swords streaked across the sky. Slaughter, slaughter, slaughter. The Longyuan River turned red. Those powerful demons and devils were killed, their blood collected in jade bottles, and their souls taken away. Those weak living beings were captured, carried away by the wild wind and thrown out of the forest. An aura that made Wuxia uneasy was spreading out from every corner of Meng Mountains. Not only the 10,000-years-old tree, all the flowers, trees, and other plants in the vicinity of Meng Mountains were awakened at the same time. Although they could not move or speak, they were born with a little bit of intelligence. They sensed some extremely tragic things that happened in Meng Mountains, and they immediately sent out the aura they sensed to Princess Zhonglu through the mysterious connection between plants. The grayish aura came rushing over from all directions, injecting into the body of the 10,000-years-old tree. The 10,000-years-old tree let out a shrill wail. Its branches and twigs gradually withered and withered, its leaves quickly turned yellow, and even the weeds around it were affected by the aura and fell to the ground. Even without Princess Zhonglu telling him, Wuxia could clearly sense the enormous aura contained in the aura. This aura was simply too strong, and a little too tragic. All the plants were wailing, and a monstrous resentment was gathering over. Even this giant tree, whose trunk was so thick that it would take 100 men to wrap their arms around it, could not withstand the resentment, and its life force was rapidly fading away. In the Tao of heaven and earth, nature was of utmost importance. For seasons came and went, flowers bloomed and withered, herbivores ate the grass, carnivores hunted the prey, and their excrement and rotting bodies became the fertilizer for the flowers and trees. This was how simple the self-circulation of nature was. A tiny bit of innate divine light transformed into all the living beings in the heaven and earth, including animals and plants. Who said that plants were heartless? These plants contained a tiny bit of innate spirituality, and in fact, they had a very deep affection for the heaven and earth, for all the living beings in the world, for the animals that had been around them for years, and for those demons that had become sentient beings. Those animals played around them, lived around them, and gave birth under their protection. There were countless giant trees that had grown up in the depths of Meng Mountains, some hundreds of years, some thousands of years, and some tens of thousands of years old, and all these were recorded in their growth rings. When these animals suddenly disappeared without a trace, when their aura vanished completely, when their souls vanished from the heaven and earth, these plants also sensed it, and a monstrous resentment was born in their bodies. If it were not for the fact that Myriad Immortals' planet was surrounded by a perilous environment that prevented the aura of these plants from spreading out, just the resentment of the countless flowers and trees in Meng Mountains would have immediately triggered some unpredictable changes. The so-called flying frost in 6 moons was just a supernatural phenomenon that was sensed by the heaven and earth. The intense resentment accumulated in Meng Mountains was more than enough to make some existences on Myriad Immortals' planet suffer the wrath of the heaven. Wuxia took a deep breath, sensing the terrible resentment in the gray aura. Nodding slowly, he reached out a hand and pressed it on the rapidly withering giant tree in front of him. "Don't die, stay alive," he said in a deep voice. "If your old friend is really gone, I'll take you to a place full of life. You are not allowed to die. Stay alive." An enormous amount of energy essence poured out of Wuxia's body and kept flowing into the giant tree's body. A dazzling green light burst out of the giant tree's body, and its withered body began to fill up rapidly, while its yellow leaves quickly turned green. A ball of black light burst out of Wuxia's palm, sucking in all the resentment coming from the countless flowers and trees in Meng Mountains like a black hole. Chaotic energy could absorb and digest anything. If this monstrous resentment were to fall on other immortals, it would be a vicious thing that would destroy their immortal souls. But after being sucked into Wuxia's body, his chaotic energy quickly digested the resentment, and in the blink of an eye, it was devoured by Wuxia. Its patriarch Yuan Hua. He sensed some information from the digested resentment, and recognized Patriarch Yuan Hua's appearance, as well as the immortal sword in his hand that emitted a scorching flame. Gradually, some of the events that happened that day began to play out in his mind. Patriarch Yuan Hua was so angry that he personally went to Myriad Immortals' planet to hunt down Wuxia's relatives and clan members. In the end, Wuxia had no relatives in Great Yan. Furious and ashamed, Patriarch Yuan Hua began to eradicate everything related to Wuxia. Star-Picking City was razed to the ground, and Great Yan was completely destroyed. However, when Patriarch Yuan Hua found his way to Meng Mountains, and was about to lay his hands on Meng Village and Little Meng City, Wanying Dragon King had already sneakily brought away all the people of Meng Village and Little Meng City. His heart was burning with anger, but he could not vent it out completely. As a result, Patriarch Yuan Hua became even more bedeviled. However, he had massacred Star-Picking City and hundreds of major cities of Great Yan, killing hundreds of millions of innocent people. Because of that, Patriarch Yuan Hua had finally drawn the attention of some fiends from the outer heavenly realms, and was possessed by some unknown existence. It was in the depths of Meng Mountains that Patriarch Yuan Hua was completely bedeviled. Many nearby flowers and trees had witnessed the process of him being possessed by the fiend. What followed was a brutal massacre and looting. Patriarch Yuan Hua kept murmuring the terms Blood Sea Technique and Pool of 10,000 Spirits Blood Pool, and muttered something about breaking through the realm of Gold Immortal and becoming the disciple of some unknown existence. He kept murmuring these things over and over again, stirring up a monstrous wave of blood in Meng Mountains. With his face turning pale, Wuxia quickly condensed his divine sense into a thread and swept it in the direction of Ji City. Meng Mountains had been slaughtered, but what about Great Yan? Princess Zhongli's face fell as well. Suddenly, a strong green wind rushed out of her body, bringing along a thread of Princess Zhongli's divine sense and rushing toward Ji City. Princess Zhongli's affinity with nature was stronger than Wuqi's, so her divine sense had arrived at Ji City before Wuqi. What greeted her eyes was a scene that was even more horrible than hell. It made Princess Zhongli's face turn pale, and she suddenly coughed out a mouthful of blood. The people of Great Yan. Suddenly, Princess Zhongli's body turned hazy and translucent. She transformed into a thundercloud and flew toward Ji City. With a sway of his body, a monstrous dark fiend energy suddenly towered into the sky around Wuqi. Patriarch Yuan Hua, you old beast, you deserve to die. With a flicker of his body, Wuqi exercised the Quafu chasing the sun step, and with just one step, he had arrived outside Ji City. Chapter 641. Corpses piled up like mountains and blood flowed like oceans. Rotting corpses were piled up on the ground, filled with air. Pale bones, colorful internal organs, silver tendons, and hair that were coiled up in a mess. Even in hell, there would not be such a scene. Countless blood bubbles of various sizes kept popping up in the huge blood pool, as if there was a stove underneath heating it up. A strong smell of blood lingered in the air, so strong that even the wind could not blow it away. The smell condensed into a pale red baleful aura in the air, in which countless twisted figures could be vaguely seen twisting and struggling, and pale faces could be seen flashing across from time to time. The souls of the dead were screaming and roaring wildly, but there was no sound at all. Tens of thousands of long bow people stood stiffly where they were, unable to move. Laughing and laughing, Patriarch Yuan Hua pushed Bai Wu onto the blood cloud, and began to tear her clothes at a leisurely pace. Bai Wu's face was pale, and her eyes were bloodshot. She opened her mouth and tried to bite her tongue to commit suicide, but Patriarch Yuan Hua reached out a hand and grabbed her jaw. What an ignorant little girl. Patriarch Yuan Hua laughed in a strange voice. You have the body of an immortal. How can you compare it to a mortal? A mortal will die if he cuts his tongue, but you will only look ugly when you do. How can you look ugly before I enjoy you? He ran his finger across Bai Wu's cheek, and a beam of blood-red light seeped into it. Bai Wu's facial muscles lost all strength, and she could only lie stiffly on the blood cloud, and let Patriarch Yuan Hua do whatever he wanted. Patriarch Jiangyan roared hoarsely. He opened his mouth so hard that the corner of his mouth was torn open, and a great deal of blood kept gushing out of the wound. Patriarch Yuan Hua was about to violate Bai Wu when he suddenly turned his head, and saw the blood oozing out of Patriarch Jiangyan's face. He laughed evilly and said, How could I forget this? Beautiful women, beautiful scenery, and wonderful things need hot blood to liven up the atmosphere. With a point of his finger, 100 tall and sturdy Longbow Kingdom men walked slowly to the edge of the blood-red cloud, standing in a circle and surrounding the cloud that was about an acre in circumference. The burly men bent down stiffly and pointed their heads at Patriarch Yuan Hua. Accompanied by a sharp sword cry, the black flying sword that was circling in the sky whistled down, and like a sharp knife cutting through tofu, it chopped off 100 large heads. Patriarch Yuan Hua, Patriarch Jiangyan, Bai Wu, Qing Xia, and even the old Taoists, including Qing Shen, Qing Xian, and Qing Yi, were all covered in hot blood. In particular, most of Bai Wu's clothes had been torn off, and her fair skin was covered in a thick layer of blood. She was covered in blood from head to toe, giving off a bloody, ferocious, and strange beauty. Patriarch Yuan Hua was excited. Laughing wildly, he quickly untied his belt and took off his Taoist robe. The old Longbow oracle, who was waving his hands and crying at the top of his lungs, suddenly raised his hands, threw his head back, and hissed, "The ghosts and deities of heaven and earth, the souls of our ancestors, and all the living things in the world can testify. Today, my clan swears a bloodline oath. If anyone can kill and expel this demon, save my clan from death, and preserve the descendants of my clan will be slaves and servants for generations to come. We will be loyal and do anything for that person." Patriarch Yuan Hua's fierce and cruel means had plunged all the Longbow people present into complete despair. At the critical moment of the extinction of his clan, the old shaman couldn't care less. He swore the most sacred bloodline oath, using the future of his clan's descendants to swear that as long as someone could save his clan and not let the bloodline of his clan go extinct, He was willing to pay the heaviest price. Even if they were slaves, in the face of the bloodline inheritance, nothing counted for anything. Tens of thousands of longbow men howled and wailed at the top of their voices. Although they could not move their bodies, and they could not control the muscles on their faces, it did not stop them from howling out from their chests, from their hearts, like the howling of the north wind. The long howl spread in all directions with an eerie chill, and wherever it passed, the blood energies and baleful chi were torn to pieces by it. Just as the old oracle was swearing the bloodline oath, and tens of thousands of longbow people were howling at the same time, Wuxia exercised the Kwafu chasing the sun step, and arrived at the edge of the blood pool, glaring angrily at the vast blood pool in front of him, and then at the piles of corpses that stretched for millions of miles. Wuxia's hairband broke inch by inch, and his long hair stood straight up even though there was no wind. A powerful force poured into his hair, making it flutter and produce a crisp ringing sound like the clashing of blades and spears. "Damn you, old fogey!" Wuxia gave a low growl as he spun his body sideways and slammed his body toward Patriarch Yuan Hua. He had used all his strength in this attack, and his body streaked across the void like a mad flood dragon as he thrust his shoulder toward Patriarch Yuan Hua's back. Faint purple mist rose from all over his body, and dragon scales kept emerging under his skin. Wuxia had exercised both the true body of heaven and earth scripture, and the heavenly dragon transformation technique to the extreme. Patriarch Yuan Hua did not expect someone to ambush him on Myriad Immortals' planet. He had killed all the local demons and fiends on Myriad Immortals' planet, and even if there were a few survivors, they were no match for him. Therefore, they had long been hiding in secret places, not daring to come out. He had killed all the living beings on Myriad Immortals' planet, even those tiny shrimps. So, how could someone ambush him? All his attention was attracted by Bai Wu's beautiful body. Just as Patriarch Yuan Hua was about to taste the delicious meat, Wuxia struck out like a clap of thunder, thrusting his shoulder into Patriarch Yuan Hua's back. A crisp crack rang out, and Patriarch Yuan Hua's body exploded. There was no flesh or bone in his body, and as soon as he exploded, he turned into a cloud of blood mist that swirled and screamed as it shot into the sky in a beam of blood-red light. Vicious curses poured out of the fleeing blood-red beam of light. Patriarch Yuan Hua cursed the heavens and the earth, cursing everyone he could find. He cursed all kinds of vicious words that were difficult to describe at the moment. As long as he could remember the names of people, whether they were his children, grandchildren, or his disciples, he would curse them without hesitation. No one was spared. A great sheet of blood-red light and ghostly flames came whistling through the dark clouds, while a stream of blood as thick as a bucket rose into the sky from the pool of blood below. The beam of blood-red light fused with the blood-red light, and ghostly flames, and before long, it had turned into a blood-red cocoon about 10 feet in diameter. Wuxia gave a cold snort as he raised a hand, and unleashed a grayish-white beam of cold air. The cold air condensed into a blade in midair, then transformed into a xianbing blade, about 10 feet long, as thin as a cicada's wing, and no more than 3 inches wide. It sped through the air with a beam of white light, and hacked onto the blood-red cocoon. It was an offensive divine ability found in the Dark Een water scripture, the Dark Een divine blade. It was a blade formed from the pure Een energy of the world, and one's own pure immortal energy. It was extremely cold, and was the best at restraining some evil and poisonous magic. It had a powerful lethality that could scare ghosts and deities away. As the blade passed through the cocoon cracked in half. Patriarch Yuan Hua, who had just regained his human form, gave a muffled snort as the blade pierced through his chest. A large piece of white ice immediately froze his bloody chest, and a cold air poured out of it, freezing the surrounding blood and evil energies into snowflakes. Patriarch Jiang Yun and the others who were tied up, as well as Patriarch Yuan Hua, all stared at Wuxia as if they were looking at a ghost. "Wuxia, you little punk!" Patriarch Yuan Hua roared at the top of his voice. Patriarch Jiang Yun and Bai Wu were able to speak now that their restrictive spells had been lifted. Both of them cried out Wuqi's name at the same time. They could never imagine how Wuxia, who had a weak cultivation base when he left, could possess such a strong overall strength in just a few years, shattering Patriarch Yuan Hua's Dharma body with just one strike. Had it not been for the strange and unpredictable fiend technique Patriarch Yuan Hua cultivated, which made his Dharma body very different from an ordinary immortal body, the strike alone would have killed him. Fiend energy rolled and rolled around Wuxia, rising into the sky in a black mist. When the surrounding blood and evil energies were touched by the fiend energy gushing out of Wuqi's body, they plunged into the fiend energy and were digested, turning into a part of it. His vast divine sense spread in all directions, enveloping the entire mountain of corpses and sea of blood. Inch by inch, Wuxia examined some things in the depths of the mountain of corpses and sea of blood, including the runes and talismans that were hidden very well. There was something strange about the blood pool in front of him. Patriarch Yuan Hua had sent a wisp of his divine sense into it, and he seemed to be deploying some evil and bizarre restrictive spells. Without hesitation, Wuqi's divine sense plunged into the blood pool and began to compete with the wisp of Patriarch Yuan Hua's divine sense for control. No matter what Patriarch Yuan Hua was going to do, Wuqi just had to destroy him completely. He could not let him succeed. Wuqi did not want to waste so much blood essence, which was the blood of countless living beings on myriad immortals' planet. If he used it as a sacrifice, it would bring him great benefits. With his hands clasped behind his back, Wuqi stared at Patriarch Yuan Hua silently. All he could think of was to use his divine sense to fight with Patriarch Yuan Hua's divine sense in the blood pool. Patriarch Yuan Hua had already laid out all sorts of restrictive spells in the blood pool, so when his divine sense rushed into it, it immediately caused the blood pool to churn and churn up into monstrous waves. Patriarch Yuan Hua hovered motionlessly in midair. He clearly sensed a terrifying divine sense that was thousands of times stronger than his divine sense was seizing control of the blood pool inch by inch. Patriarch Yuan Hua's expression flickered. Gnashing his teeth, he sent all his divine sense into the blood pool as well. He could no longer care about killing the remaining tens of thousands of longbow people. He needed to activate the blood pool immediately. Looking at Wuqi hovering in midair, the old oracle suddenly dropped to his knees and cried out, "Immortal, we have sworn a bloodline oath. If you can save us and save our clan from being wiped out, we will serve you loyally for generations to come." Bloodline oath? The longbow people's bloodline oath? Wuqi, who was worried about the lack of potential in East Sea County due to its sparse population, was overjoyed. He quickly turned his head and moved Akka to the old oracle as he said happily, "That's great. Since you are loyal to me, I'll definitely make your clan grow stronger. Haha, a mere puppet curse is nothing to me." Then he pointed his finger out. A great sheet of chaotic spirit light shot out of his fingertip, transforming into countless primordial divine runes, and smashing into the bodies of the longbow people. Then, a series of explosions rang out, and black smoke rose from the bodies of the longbow people, as they suddenly regained their ability to move. Wuqi laughed and said, "I've saved you today. Let's see who can kill you now." Then he opened his mouth and shot out a beam of chaotic spirit light. Tens of thousands of longbow people felt their bodies lightened, as they were dragged into Wuqi's interstitial world at the same time. Patriarch Yuan Hua roared furiously. The blood essence and soul of one longbow man was equal to the total amount of blood essence in tens of thousands of ordinary people. By saving tens of thousands of longbow people, Wuqi had taken away the blood essence and soul of hundreds of millions of ordinary people. Patriarch Yuan Hua could not care less. His body transformed into a beam of blood-red light and plunged into the blood pool. Immediately after that, a colossal fiend statue made of blood rose from the pool. The fiend statue stood about 100 miles tall, shrouded in a towering stench of blood. As soon as it appeared, it threw a punch at Wuqi. Chapter 642. It was hard to tell what the fiend statue looked like, but it was covered in a layer of blood that was hundreds of feet thick, making it hard to see its true form. As soon as he threw out a punch, all the blood energies within 1,000 miles immediately rushed toward his fist as if it had gone mad, transforming into something that looked like a steel plate, covered with sharp triangular spikes, and smashed down toward Wuqi with a gust of wind. Wuqi laughed and was about to fight the fiend statue head-on. His true body of heaven and earth mantra and heavenly dragon transformation technique had already reached the peak of the heaven immortal realm. It was a common thing for him to shatter a star with one punch. He was in the mood to weigh the pros and cons of this fiend statue. But before he could throw out his punch, a beam of 5-colored light flashed across from the side. Princess Zhonglu had arrived. Princess Zhongli's pretty face turned cold as she saw the giant fiend throwing its fist toward Wuqi. The 5-colored flame in her eyes shot out thousands of feet away like a volcanic eruption, causing the wind and clouds within 10,000 miles to change color. Large dark clouds quickly gathered in the sky and came crashing down from the sky. Countless thunderbolts as thick as water buckets smashed down, smashing the clouds above the pool of blood and smashing them to pieces. A sheet of purple light shot out of Princess Zhongli's fingertip as she softly chanted a ballad with a simple rhythm. Vaguely, countless spirit lights swirled around her, and suddenly, countless thunderbolts the size of human heads condensed in the purple light, smashing onto the giant fiend statue like a rainstorm. Earth-shaking explosions could be heard one after another. Every single thunderbolt was incredibly powerful, and the shockwaves generated by each thunderbolt could reach hundreds of miles away. Countless thunderbolts blasted on the golem's body, blowing blood out of its body. Large amounts of blood were evaporated by the thunderbolts, turning into blood-red mist and rising into the sky. Countless imprisoned souls in the blood let out miserable howls as they were shattered by the thunderbolts, turning into countless fireflies that drifted away in all directions. Patriarch Yuanhua's shrill howl rang out from the depths of the blood pool. "Wu Qi, you little punk! You've killed my beloved disciple. I'll definitely kill you today." Wu Qi sneered again and again. He clenched his fists, and the wind between heaven and earth roared and quickly gathered on his fists. His fists were shrouded in a hazy green light, and not long after, they became dazzling, like two small suns that no one dared to look directly at. In a radius of 10,000 miles, whirlwinds of sheep horns suddenly rose up. The sharp whistling of the wind was so loud that it hurt people's ears. With a loud shout, Wu Qi pressed his hands downwards. 2 balls of green light whizzed out one after the other, and crashed into the blood pool with a strong gust of wind. A cyan storm erupted, and this part of the world suddenly became a world of wind. Wu Qi silently recited the various essentials of the Song of Gale. His limbs and bones seemed to have become hollow like bamboo, while the strong storm shuttled back and forth in his body, gradually drawing the surrounding wind into countless 100-mile-long wind blades that slashed and slashed wildly in the blood pool. The blood pool, measuring 10,000 miles in circumference, was torn to pieces by the wind blades, and more than half of the restrictive spells that Patriarch Yuanhua had placed under the pool were destroyed by Wu Qi's violent attack. Using his divine will, Wu Qi quickly controlled the blood energy in the surroundings, and condensed them into primordial runes. Numerous runes emerged one after another, and a faint blood-red light rushed out from the depths of the blood pool. Patriarch Yuanhua was hiding in the depths of the blood pool, and his control over the blood pool was starting to weaken. Whether it was in terms of cultivation base or attainment of the Tao, Wu Qi was now far stronger than Patriarch Yuanhua. Patriarch Yuanhua, who had become a fiend, acted more on instinct, and his every move was irrational. Therefore, it was a piece of cake for Wu Qi to deal with the current Patriarch Yuanhua with brute force. Not only that, Princess Zhonglu was constantly striking down countless thunderbolts, each of which was the divine thunder of subduing fiends of the primordial Tao of divinity, which was specially used to deal with all kinds of evil fiends. The thunder magic of the primordial Tao of divinity was condensed directly from the power of nature. Although it was less subtle and ingenious in structure than the thunder magic of immortals, it was more direct, more domineering, and more in line with the profound principles of heaven and earth. Therefore, its lethality was more direct and terrible. The huge fiend statue had been smashed to pieces by Princess Zhonglu, and now the thunderbolts were drilling into the blood sea. Princess Zhongli's divine sense, which was more dexterous and delicate than Wu Qi's, had turned into a huge net and covered the blood sea, using it to track Patriarch Yuanhua's movements. The divine thunder of subduing fiends, which had an amazing lethality against evil fiends, was shuttling back and forth in the blood sea with Princess Zhongli's divine sense. Countless purple thunderbolts were weaving back and forth, dyeing the vast blood sea with a faint layer of purple. Suddenly, Princess Zhongli's divine sense discovered a blood shadow flashing past at high speed in the depths of the blood sea. Thousands of divine thunder of subduing fiends rushed over at high speed, clinging to the shadow and exploding at the same time. A hoarse howl of agony rang out from the bottom of the blood sea as Patriarch Yuanhua's true form was torn to pieces. Countless drops of blood shot out in all directions, most of which were turned into nothingness by the exploding thunderbolts. Each drop of blood was the manifestation of Patriarch Yuanhua's natal energy essence. Now that most of the blood sea was turned into smoke, Patriarch Yuanhua's vitality was severely damaged. After letting out a few shrill howls, Patriarch Yuanhua's true form hid on a dark altar made of bones in the deepest part of the blood sea. While absorbing the blood nearby to heal his body, he gritted his teeth and looked at the chaotic blood sea around him. The wind blades controlled by Wuxia were hacking and slashing in the blood sea like lightning bolts. These wind blades were a great threat to Patriarch Yuanhua. He saw with his own eyes that a few corpses floating in the blood sea were hit by one of the wind blades. And then tens of thousands of green wind blades of various sizes immediately rushed up and shredded the corpses into the tiniest particles. Then, hundreds of purple thunderbolts swarmed over, and the thunderbolts quickly exploded and turned the tiny particles into nothingness. The vast pool of blood had completely turned into a world controlled by Wuqi and Princess Zhonglu. Patriarch Yuanhua could only hide on the core altar, struggling at death's door with the protection of the broken blood-red flag behind him. This tens of feet long and wide blood-red flag was slowly fluttering in the blood-red water. Whenever a wind blade or lightning bolt approached, the flag would shake slightly, and the surrounding blood-red water would tumble, sending the wind blade or lightning bolt hundreds of feet away in another direction. The change of space was extremely magical. Even with the current divine abilities of Wuqi and Princess Zhonglu, they did not discover Patriarch Yuanhua, who was protected by the flag. It showed how powerful the original form of the flag was. But now, it was riddled with hundreds of holes of various sizes, and the flagpole was badly damaged by some divine weapon. It looked as if it had been bitten by a few mad dogs. The power of the flag was far weaker than when it was in perfect condition. "You little bastard! You little bitch!" Patriarch Yuanhua trembled with rage. "You've come to Myriad Immortals Planet? What about White Cloud Planet? Where is Green Cliff Planet? Damn it! I should have killed that little bitch myself that day. I should have taken her by force. I should have sowed the seeds myself, and I could have reaped great benefits." Brandishing his fists, Patriarch Yuanhua growled furiously. "A moment of carelessness has cost me the whole game." Patriarch Yuanhua howled in exasperation. Then his voice suddenly became very soft and feminine as he said, "But how could I lose? I, Lord Blood Ocean, am the descendant of Li Xuezi. No, I am Li Xuezi, the ancient celestial fiend. How could I possibly lose?" Pointing at the void with both hands, Patriarch Yuanhua said in a strange voice, "Just wait and see. The Emperor of the Celestial Court? The 5 Emperors of 5 Directions? Xianyuan's sword is a good treasure. I can't believe my blood-draining fiend flag could not withstand its slash. Ah, what a headache. Who does Xianyuan's sword belong to? Who are the 5 Emperors of 5 Directions? The Emperor of the Celestial Court? Isn't he dead?" Taking a deep breath, a thin beam of blood-red light suddenly shot out from between Patriarch Yuanhua's brows, within which a tiny blood-red figure could be vaguely seen sitting cross-legged. He cried out in a low voice, "I can't care so much anymore. I need to extract the power of souls from the pool of blood to restore my fiend soul, and then I'll deal with the rest later. I must avenge this. I'm not going to suffer any losses." Wuqi and Princess Zhonglu were using their divine abilities to search for Patriarch Yuanhua in the pool of blood. But as Patriarch Yuanhua was protected by the blood-draining fiend flag, they could not find his true form no matter how hard they tried. For a moment, Wuqi was a little anxious. Suddenly, he gave a loud cry as his body grew to about 100,000 feet tall. Then, with a twist of his body, in front of the stunned Patriarch Jiang Yin and the others, he transformed into a 100,000 feet long, gold and silver dragon python of fire and ice. A ferocious and savage aura spread out of Wuqi's body. Judging by Wuqi's current appearance and sensing the aura in his body, it was clear that Wuqi was a real beast at the moment. He was no longer an immortal with a strong cultivation base. Patriarch Jiangyun roared. Wuqi, are you really a dragon python that has cultivated into a human form? Wuqi did not answer. Suddenly, a huge tumor bulged out of his neck. He was gathering all the power in his body, transforming it into the unique Xianbing divine energy of dragon pythons, and was about to spray it out to freeze the whole pool of blood. He did not believe that Patriarch Yuan Hua could survive in the blood pool if it was frozen. But Princess Zhongli flew into a rage. She pointed a finger at Patriarch Jiangyin and snapped. You are the dragon python that has cultivated into a human form. Your whole family, from the old to the young, are all dragon pythons that have cultivated into a human form. Standing on Princess Zhongli's shoulder, little Kair was also twittering and cursing at Patriarch Jiangyun, and then she spat at him with great force. Ao Buzan stood on Wuqi's head with all four claws, staring at little Kair with a distressed look. You are not a lady, but you do have the bloodline of the phoenix, don't you? Lao Tzu only cares about his own happiness. Why should he care so much about a lady or not? How am I going to deal with this little chick? I don't know where to start if I keep a tight watch on her. Hovering in midair, Wuqi prepared for a full quarter of an hour. Then a white beam of light, about 1 mile in diameter, shot whistling through the air and hit the blood pool. The blood pool froze abruptly, and then countless ice cubes of various sizes appeared out of thin air, quickly freezing the blood pool into a blood-colored ice cube. Right at this moment, the souls of the billions of living beings in the blood pool disappeared at the same time. A great suction force came from the core of the blood pool, sucking all the souls into it. A very fine beam of blood-red light shot out from the frozen ice cube, and a monstrous fiend aura slowly spread out. Patriarch's fiend soul has finally recovered by 30%. 30% of my fiend soul is more than enough for me to roam freely. Let me kill this little beast first, then enjoy your little bitch. After that, I'll extract the endless blood essence in this blood pool to restore my fiend energy. Suddenly, the beam of blood-red light flickered. Wuqi, Princess Zhonglu Ao Buzan, and little Kair froze at the same time, and then their bodies fell from the sky and fell to the ground. The scene before their eyes suddenly turned into a boundless sea of blood, and their divine souls had been sucked into an unknown space. Chapter 643. The blood-red space had a circumference of about 100 miles. Below it was a surging sea of blood, while above it were patches of blood-red clouds. Just the sight of it was enough to make one's mind tremble, and cause one's true spirit to almost collapse. Amidst the sea of blood and clouds of blood, a huge chair made of white bones floated in the air, and a bloody devil figure sat cross-legged on the chair. Beside him were dozens of naked women dancing like devils, and all kinds of strange postures could cause one's blood to boil, and they couldn't help but feel aroused. Wuqi and Princess Zhongli focused their minds and watched the devil figure silently. Little Kair closed her eyes. Her body was protected by a ring of bright, glass-like crimson flame, which prevented the devil's thoughts from invading. Her divine soul was also safe and sound. The flame on little Kair's body was the Phoenix clan's famous true spirit fire, Nanmingli fire. It had many wonderful uses, and protecting one's mind was only a small part of it. This space was clearly created by the devil figure, using his enormous divine thought. It was similar to an immortal's interstitial world. In an immortal's interstitial world, everything was real, and was no different from the outside world. It could even support countless people. As for this world created by the devil figure, it would be more appropriate to call it the devil's void. This space existed in between existence and nothingness. It was born and destroyed according to the devil figure's thoughts. There were endless mysteries between life and death, making it infinitely mysterious. Wuqi and the others had accidentally fallen into its trap. They were sucked into the devil's void by the devil figure's tremendous power, which was condensed from the souls of countless living beings. In this void, the devil shadow could transform into anything with a single thought and destroy everything with a single thought. It had a huge advantage over the others. just like the dancing female devils beside his armchair. They were also the devil figure's manifestation with the help of his divine thought. Every move he made was in line with the great Tao of the devil sect. Every move he made was filled with boundless murderous intent. If one accidentally fell into his trap, one's soul would be destroyed. Little Kay knew that she was young and her cultivation base was shallow. Thus, when she was sucked into the devil's void, she immediately released a wisp of Nanmingli fire from the depths of her divine soul to protect it. She dared not be careless. Wuxia and Princess Zhonglu were not afraid of the dancing female devils. Princess Zhonglu was too shy to look at their unbearable movements, while Wuxia watched them perform the heavenly fiend dance with delight. If he had a dozen bottles of iced beer in hand, and a very exciting dance tune, Wuxia would love to dance with the female devils. Princess Zhonglu was proficient in the art of ghosts and gods of the primordial divine Tao. She was best at dealing with all kinds of evil ghosts and gods, so a mere heavenly fiend dance could not shake her mind. Wuqi's divine power was enough to make all the evil immortals who cultivated in the art of illusion and soul enchantment vomit blood. His chaotic spiritual energy was omnipotent. The soul-stirring fiend aura emitted by the heavenly fiend dance was all spirit medicine to replenish his magic power. He wished there were more of these female devils. After pulling Wuxia and his companions into the devil's void, the bloody fiend's shadow did not make a sound. He was waiting for Wuxia and his companions to fall into his trap, and then he would come up with other plans. He had just devoured the souls of countless living beings on Myriad Immortals' planet. Although the enormous soul energy had restored 30% of his true spirit and fiend soul, he still felt a little indigestion. He was working hard to digest the enormous soul source energy in these souls, and erasing some of the tough soul marks in them. As he was busy with this, he had no time to pay attention to Wuxia and his companions. For a moment, everyone was staring at each other. Suddenly, Aobuzin, who was coiled around Wuqi's neck, began to howl. After entering the devil's void, Aobuzin fixed his furtive eyes on those female devils who were dancing wildly. After staring at each other for a quarter of an hour, all the scales on Aobuzin's body began to sway, and a stream of saliva trickled down from the corner of his mouth. Then he leaped forward, let out a shrill howl, and pounced on those female devils. "Just follow me, my beauties. Follow Lao Tzu, and you'll have a good life. Every night, Lao Tzu will make you feel so good that you'll wish you were dead. You'll die and die again, and you'll live and die again." Saliva flew out from the corner of Aobuzin's mouth, and his eyes shone brightly as he roared. "Lao Tzu has swept across the world with his dragon whip and spear. Only you will know the power of Lao Tzu's martial arts after you've tasted it." Those female devils laughed softly. One of them, who had huge breasts and extremely fair skin, spread her arms and greeted Aobuzin with a smile. "Come on, come on, come on." The female devil let out a beautiful cry. Her eyes were watery, as if water could drip out of them at any moment. While cheering, Aobuzin leaped onto the female devil's body. He stood up on his hind legs, grabbed the female devil's breasts with his 2 hind claws, and grabbed the female devil's face with his 2 front claws. Then he opened his mouth, which was filled with saliva, and fiercely kissed the female devil's pale red lips. Sitting on the throne, the fiend giggled. He slowly rose to his feet, raised a finger and said, "One." A bright gleam flickered in Princess Zhongli's eyes as she cursed in a low voice. "This lecherous dragon is such a disgrace." Little Kayer hurriedly nodded and agreed with Princess Zhongli's words. Tilting her head, she looked at Aobuzin disdainfully and gently flapped her wings. Wuxia smiled faintly. Aobuzin's background was mysterious and unfathomable, and there were still many things that he was hiding from Wuxia. If the other people around Wuxia were caught in the amorous dance, they might have their souls destroyed, and their divine soul power sucked dry by the female devil. But Aobuzin was an old lecher, a great general in the amorous field. How could he be subdued by a mere dance? Wuxia remembered that Aobuzin seemed to have boasted that among his mistresses, there were a few formidable figures among the heavenly fiends from outer heavenly realms. How could Aobuzin, who was able to make those heartless and heartless outer sky devils bear children for Aobuzin? Pop, pop. Aobuzin and the female devil gave each other a deep, wet kiss. His long tongue stuck out for half a foot long and rolled up in the female devil's mouth. After that, Aobuzin spat loudly on the ground and complained. This old devil must have never touched a woman in his entire life. Why can't this female devil's tongue move? The tongue of this beautiful girl should be as nimble as a snake, as nimble as a fox, as smooth as sand, and as sweet as honey. That's the best. This stiff and cold tongue is like a braised pig's tongue. The devil, who had just risen to his feet, paused for a moment, then roared furiously. You're not enchanted by my magic? Aobuzin gave a weird laugh. With a flash, his body, which was less than 2 feet long, suddenly transformed into a dark bolt of lightning and darted out. His right front claw expanded to the size of a cattail leaf fan, fiercely piercing into the lower part of the devil's body. Aobuzin roared happily. You've underestimated Lao Tzu. Let me show you the flying dragon-stealing peach palm that Lao Tzu used to shake the entire 3 realms, and even made the emperor of the celestial court tremble with fear. Suddenly, a black light flashed across Aobuzin's right front claw, and then a mass of runes that looked like a colony of ants flashed across it, transforming into a plume of black smoke that enveloped the claw. He clenched his 5 claws and pulled them out. Along with a shrill howl, Aobuzin pulled out a string of bloody things. After that, Aobuzin immediately transformed into a dark beam of light, and returned to Wuxia's shoulder. The devil roared furiously at Aobuzin, then growled in confusion. This is the void of fiend will created by my divine will. How could I be injured in this void of fiend will? My body in here is the manifestation of my true spirit and devil soul, and it doesn't have any bodily organs. How could you? How could you? With a mysterious smile on his face, Aobuzin leisurely showed off the 3 bloody treasures in his hand. He chuckled and said, What has Lao Tzu not seen before? Back then, there was an idiot whose wife was stolen by Lao Tzu. He trapped Lao Tzu in the void of fiend will, trying to refine Lao Tzu's true spirit with his natal fiend flame. What a pity, what a pity! Lao Tzu is a talented genius. After being trapped in the void of fiend will for 3 months, he managed to comprehend the flying dragon-stealing peach palm. Carelessly throwing away the 3 treasures, Aobuzin wiped the blood off his claws on Wuqi's shoulder, then said complacently, You shouldn't have used the void of fiend will to deal with Lao Tzu. Your true spirit and your true spirit are intertwined. Although Lao Tzu took out your true spirit and devil soul, the things he took out were the treasures of your true spirit. Wuqi was struck dumb, Princess Zhonglu was stunned, and little Kair bowed her head and covered it with her wings. Aobuzin laughed wildly and said, Why don't you send a thread of your divine sense out to check if your true spirit has been castrated by Lao Tzu? The bloody fiend howled miserably. Suddenly his body turned stiff. Obviously he had sent a thread of his divine sense out to check on his own body. Not long after that, the fiend began waving his hands and screaming wildly. Pointing his finger at Aobuzin, he roared furiously, Despicable! Shameless! Filthy! You! What is your background? How could you attack Patriarch's true spirit through the void of fiend will? You! How could you use such a vicious fiend technique? Aobuzin grinned, not bothering to explain anything to the fiend. Chuckling, Wuqi instinctively clamped his legs together, and gave Aobuzin a fierce glare. After that he pointed his right hand out and unleashed a large sheet of divine flame of order, bringing with it a high temperature that could frighten all divine souls, fiend souls, evil ghosts, evil gods, and extraterrestrial fiends. The purple and green divine flame filled the entire void in an instant. Without hesitation, Princess Zhonglu raised both hands up high. The divine flame, which was thicker, hotter, better in quality, and more agile than the divine flame of order shot out from Wuqi's body, transformed into several hundred fiery dragons and thrust out, cooperating with the divine flame unleashed by Wuqi, wreaking havoc in the surroundings. The high temperature melted everything in this void. The blood clouds were burned through, the blood sea dried up, the evil girls turned into nothingness, and the throne turned into a wisp of smoke. The fiend let out a shrill howl, then roared in exasperation. Divine flame of order! How could a junior like you possess such an innate divine flame? Bastard! How could you possess such an innate spirit item? Wu Qi and Princess Zhonglu were too lazy to give any explanation to this fiend soul. The monstrous divine flame of order converged inwardly, tightly wrapping the fiend's soul within. A miserable howl echoed out, as a large piece of the fiend's soul's body was suddenly burned off. The fiend's soul exploded abruptly, shooting out a beam of blood-red light, and quickly escaping from the void of fiend will. The enormous soul power in the void had lost control, rolling and rocking chaotically in the void. Wu Qi, Princess Zhonglu, and Ao Buzin were struck with wild joy. Hastily, they exercised their divine abilities and absorbed the boundless soul power to their heart's content. In an instant, the three of them had shared the boundless soul power. After that, the void shattered, and their souls returned to their fleshly bodies. Chapter 644. On the blood cloud, Patriarch Jiangyin and the others saw a beam of blood-red light shoot up into the sky, and then spread out in all directions. In the next moment, the huge snake Wu Qi had transformed into fell heavily to the ground, while Princess Zhonglu, Ao Buzin, and little Kair froze and fell to the ground as well. Before long, Patriarch Yuan Hua could be seen sitting on an altar made of bones, with a tattered flag fluttering behind his back. The strong aura of blood almost made Patriarch Jiangyun and the others pass out. Patriarch Yuan Hua sat on the altar with a blank expression, his eyes dull and lifeless. Clearly, his divine sense had gone into the fiend void, and he had no reaction to what was happening outside. Bai Wu was horrified. She had just seen Wu Qi and Princess Zhonglu beat Patriarch Yuan Hua to the point that he dared not show his face, and she thought they had finally found their savior. But in the end, Patriarch Yuan Hua's fiend cultivation technique was so fierce that he had subdued Wu Qi and the others with just a flash of blood-red light. At the thought of the tragic end she would face if she fell into Patriarch Yuan Hua's hands, Bai Wu threw her head back and gave a furious roar. Plumes of white smoke sprayed out of her body as dozens of shuttle-shaped thunderbolts, each the size of a water tank, shot whistling out and smashed fiercely on Patriarch Yuan Hua's body. The tattered flag fluttered slightly, and a sheet of blood-red light rushed out of Patriarch Yuan Hua's body. The thunderbolts wheeled around him and flew off into the distance. A dull rumble of thunder could be heard coming from afar, and the thunderbolts seemed to have struck something. The dark clouds in the distance churned, and a faint white gleam flickered in the sky. Patriarch Jiangyin cried out in alarm. With the flag protecting Patriarch Yuan Hua, Bai Wu could not hurt him at all. Patriarch Jiangyin called out to Bai Wu and asked her to quickly remove the restrictive spells on the stone pillars. There were more than 20 Heaven Immortals from White Cloud Immortal Sect and Tranquil Vimla Sect here. If they joined forces, they still had a chance to kill Patriarch Yuan Hua. After all, Patriarch Yuan Hua was only relying on a tattered flag to protect himself. Even if the flag was an incredible immortal item, it looked like it had lost most of its power. It would be unreasonable for the joint forces of over 20 Heaven Immortals to fail to destroy a badly damaged immortal item. Lady Bai Wu rushed to Patriarch Jiangyun's side in a flurry, her hands constantly changing incantation gestures, casting all kinds of restrictive spells she knew and hitting the stone pillars. But Bai Wu had learned all her immortal magic from Patriarch Jiangyun. As the immortal magic they cultivated was not outstanding, and they only knew 2 or 3 of them, they could not deal with the strange restrictive spells that Patriarch Yuan Hua inherited from the ancient fiend gods. After exhausting all the immortal energy in his body, the stone pillar only flashed a few dazzling flames. Other than that, there was no other effect. Bai Wu sat down on the blood cloud dejectedly, while Patriarch Jiangyin threw his head back and let out a long sigh, tears of blood rolling down his cheeks. Clenching his teeth, Patriarch Jiangyin stared at Bai Wu and cried out in a deep voice, "Bai Wu, go now. If you have the opportunity to cultivate the great Tao of gold immortals in the future, come back and avenge us. But if not, just find a peaceful place and live a carefree life." It was as if Bai Wu's soul had flown away. She did not respond to Patriarch Jiangyun's words at all. No matter how Patriarch Jiangyun tried to persuade her, she just stared blankly at him, tears of blood rolling down her cheeks. Patriarch Jiangyun could not help but stare blankly at Bai Wu as his lips trembled. Suddenly, he burst into tears and cried, Heaven, I, Jiangyun, have never done anything against heaven and reason in my life. Why am I being punished today? Heaven, why is heaven like this? Can you please open your eyes? While Patriarch Jiangyun was weeping and screaming, Qing Xian, Qing Shen, and Qing Yi, the three old Taoists, had a belly full of grievances. Imprisoned on the stone pillars, they could not even cry if they wanted to. Tears streamed down their cheeks as the three old Taoists stared at the cloudy sky. They did not know who to tell their grievances to. Patriarch Jiangyun had never done any evil deeds, and the same went for the three brothers. They had spent all their lives in minor heavenly circle realm, cultivating in a peaceful and steady manner, taking in a few apprentices and founding the tranquil Vimla sect. But they had never done anything like bullying the weak. Why did they have to suffer this fiend calamity? They were in secluded cultivation on Myriad Immortals' planet. So how did they end up in a situation where they were meat on someone's chopping block? Suddenly, Bai Wu rose to her feet, gritted her teeth, and said to Patriarch Jiangyun with a smile, "Don't worry, this old thief is not really impervious to fire and water." A sonorous sword cry rang out as a beam of sword light shot out from her forehead. It was a small sword, less than 1 inch and 2 inches long, glinting with a misty white light like a leaf. The sword gleamed nimbly, and its blade leaped like a fish. It was a very intelligent creature. When Patriarch Jiangyun and Qing Xia saw the small sword, their faces flickered with chi-chis. The faces of Qing Xian and his brothers turned pale as well. They knew what Bai Wu was going to do. With a strange laugh, Bai Wu looked at Patriarch Jiangyun and said, "If we are going to die, we will die together. How can I abandon my husband and sister and run away?" With a sway of her body, Bai Wu transformed into a clump of white smoke and wrapped around the small sword. The sword emitted a dazzling white light and gradually began to absorb the smoke. It was a desperate attack when an immortal destroyed his immortal soul and immortal body, fusing all his immortal energy into the prime sword. When Patriarch Jiangyun was traveling around the world, he had found a fragment of this immortal magic in an ancient cave abode. Not only Bai Wu, but even Qing Xian, Qing Yi, and Qing Shen had also practiced this magic. Therefore, when he saw Bai Wu's action, the corners of Patriarch Jiangyun's eyes exploded at the same time. Blood was slowly dripping from Qing Xia's mouth, while Qing Xian and his brothers swayed and kept coughing up blood from the corners of their mouths. They were either husband and wife or good friends. They had been friends for several periods, and Fairy Bai Wu was risking her life for him. How could they not be moved? Patriarch Jiangyun suddenly cried out when he saw that Bai Wu was about to die together with them. Suddenly, a plume of dark mist sprayed out of the void in front of Patriarch Yuanhua, who was sitting cross-legged above the blood pool. A pitch-black dragon claw, about the size of a basin, slowly stretched out of the mist, grabbing Patriarch Yuanhua's lower body and twisting it left and right for 7 to 8 times. Then, it pulled out a clump of flesh and blood from Patriarch Yuanhua's lower body. The dragon's claw even flicked its finger, flicking away the pieces of torn clothes and black hair attached to the piece of flesh far away. Only then did it grab the piece of flesh and flee back. The black mist dissipated, and Patriarch Jiangyun cried out hastily, "Bai Wu, don't do anything stupid. Something has changed." Bai Wu's figure gradually came out of the eye of cloud. She, too, had her mouth wide open as she stared blankly at the dark mist. She had seen what had happened just now. It was clear that someone had used some unimaginable divine ability to tear through the void and hurt Patriarch Yuanhua's vital part. But that person was too despicable, as he had actually grabbed Patriarch Yuanhua's vital part. If he were to crush Patriarch Yuanhua's heart or head with his bare hands, wouldn't that mean that he would be destroying his immortal body? If a heaven immortal lost his immortal body, even if his immortal soul could escape, he would be like a tree without roots. With 99% of his overall strength gone, he would be at the mercy of others. Why did the dragon claw do such a strange thing? Wasn't the owner of this dragon claw a little too despicable? Patriarch Jiangyun and the others were rendered speechless by the strange action of the dragon claw. On the other side, Patriarch Yuanhua's body suddenly trembled, and a threatening blood-red gleam shot out of his eyes. What happened next stunned Patriarch Jiangyun and the others. Patriarch Yuan Hua jumped to his feet with his arms around his crotch, howling at the top of his lungs as he fell to the altar with his arms around his crotch. His body twitched and rolled on the altar, and the pain was so great that snot and tears kept flowing out of his eyes and nose. Immortal cultivators had far better control over their bodies than mortals. Even if his vital part was severely injured, it should not be in such pain. As long as he exercised his cultivation technique to seal off the nearby meridians and nerves, he would not feel any pain at all. Judging from Patriarch Yuan Hua's appearance, it did not look like his lower body had been torn apart, but as if someone had chopped his entire body into dumpling stuffing with a large knife. The ground suddenly trembled, and Wuxia, who had transformed into a 100,000 feet long dragon python, slowly raised his upper body. With a faint aura of ice and fire bursting out of his eyes, Wuxia opened his mouth and said with a wry smile, "Why is it so painful? What did you do to me?" Aobuzan stood on his hind legs on top of Wuqi's head. "Nothing," he said with a complacent smile. Lao Tzu did not only hurt his fleshly body, but also tore off the corresponding part of his divine soul. Wuqi's huge body trembled. Suddenly, he raised his tail and slapped Aobuzan flat on the top of his head. Princess Zhonglu and little Kair came to their senses at the same time. They flew up into the air and looked at Patriarch Yuan Hua, who was twitching and howling in horror. They could not help but gasp at the same time. Aobuzan's dragon-stealing peach hand was truly a vicious move, and many people had been tortured by it in the past. Slowly, Wuqi's huge body shrank and returned to his human form. He gave Patriarch Jiang Yun and the others on the blood-red cloud a glance, then suddenly breathed out a long sigh and said, "Old Taoist Yuan Hua, you reap what you sow. I'll kill you today, and after that, I'll wipe out your entire clan and your bloodline." Patriarch Yuan Hua, who was lying on the altar with his lower body in his arms, twitching and howling, suddenly straightened his body. With a hideous smile on his face, he said to Wuxia, "How can you kill me today? Although I didn't fulfill Senior's request, Senior still gave me a talisman, and he promised to save my life when my life was in danger. He Wuxia will settle this score later." Laughing loudly, a great plume of purple smoke and golden flame suddenly burst out of Patriarch Yuan Hua's sleeve. Wuqi's face flickered as he swung the star shark blade toward Patriarch Yuan Hua's head with a great sheet of starlight. At that very moment, a loud boom rang out, and the void 10,000 miles in circumference above Myriad Immortals' planet was shattered by a palm strike. A giant hand, about an acre in circumference, made up of golden light and purple smoke, stretched out of the shattered void at a seemingly slow speed, grabbed Patriarch Yuan Hua, and flew up into the sky. Wuxia was horrified. The giant hand emanated a terrible aura that no one could fight against. Although he had used all his strength, he still could not move. Of all the people present, only Aobuzan's body trembled, and blood suddenly sprayed out of his body, accompanied by the sound of bones breaking in his body. Aobuzan sneakily reached out his front claw and grabbed at the giant hand. The void closed abruptly, and Patriarch Yuan Hua disappeared without a trace. In Aobuzan's claw was an inkstone shrouded in purple smoke. Chapter 645. Above the Nine Heavens. Ever since the primordial era, when the great sages of the primordial era jointly established the heavenly court, the position of the great emperor of the heavenly court had changed countless times. But no matter how the throne was replaced, the celestial court had always remained the same. It was majestic, glorious, and aboveboard, illuminated by purple clouds and golden light all year round. Immortal cranes and cloud dragons danced in the sky, and countless gold immortals and dignitaries came and went on clouds. The atmosphere of the immortals was indescribable. Above the 33 palaces of the celestial court, where the sun and moon shone, was the commonly known Nine Heavens. The Nine Heavens was the interstitial world condensed by the 9 ancient great saints. After countless years of expansion and development, it had now evolved into 9 blessed heavenly realms. The first was the Middle Heaven, the second was the Envy Heaven, the third was the Tsung Heaven, the fourth was the Gung Heaven, the fifth was the Bai Heaven, the sixth was the Open Heaven, the seventh was the Salt Heaven, the eighth was the Shun Heaven, and the ninth was the Chung heaven. In the 9 heavens realms, only almighty experts could establish cave abodes. The immortals of the celestial court could not enter the 9 heavens easily, and the immortals in the 9 heavens rarely left it. The 9 heavens corresponded to the 9 realms of primordial immortals, where cave abodes and Taoist rites were established. A 9th-tier primordial immortal, who had just stepped into the realm of primordial immortals, naturally lived in the lowest middle heaven. An 8th-tier primordial immortal could move his cave abode to the envy heaven. By analogy, those who truly possessed the strength of a 1st-tier primordial immortal, whose cultivation base had reached an incredible level and could create and destroy all things, lived in the highest Chung heaven. The 9 heavens was vast and boundless, and its mysteries could not be understood by ordinary people. Unless one was in it, it would be difficult to understand the truth. On this very day, somewhere in the middle heaven of the 1st heaven, amidst the boundless clear air and boundless purple clouds, dozens of mountains, measuring tens of thousands of miles in circumference, were hovering amidst the clear air and purple clouds. Between the mountains were countless palaces and pavilions, each magnificent and luxurious to the extreme. The materials used to build these palaces and pavilions were enough to make heaven immortals and lower-tier gold immortals fight for them with all their might in the outside world. But in here, they were merely used as tiles and bricks. Amidst the tens of mountains, there were at least 100 of these dazzling palaces and pavilions. Above each of the palaces was a purple-gold energy stream, charging up into the sky. That meant there was a gold immortal standing guard inside each of the palaces. Between these palaces and pavilions were countless herb gardens and gardens, and the children, gardeners, and servants who came and went were all heaven immortals. Thousands of kilometers above these mountains, there was another green mountain floating in the air. The mountain was no more than 100 miles high, and about 300 or 400 miles in circumference. It had an exquisite appearance, like a meticulously crafted brush holder. Looking at it from a distance, it was a delightful sight. On this mountain peak, there were some exquisite wooden houses and bamboo houses that were scattered in a picturesque manner, giving off a natural charm. But on the top of the mountain stood a green jade platform that was 3,600 feet tall, and 1,000 feet in circumference, like a huge brush that pierced the sky. At the top of the platform was a simple and unadorned palace. In the square outside the palace, nearly 1,000 beautiful female immortals in luxurious robes were waiting quietly. They looked as if they were carved from jade, standing there silently, motionless, silent, and not even breathing. All of them were carefully restraining all their auras, not daring to show the slightest sign of fatigue or carelessness. The inside of the palace was extremely vast, at least 100 miles in circumference. On the ceiling of the palace, the sun, the moon, and the stars were moving according to the real celestial phenomena, while on the floor was a scene of mountains and rivers. Countless mountains and rivers were hidden on the floor, making it an extremely vast and magical scene. At the end of the palace was a cloud platform, on which sat a middle-aged man in a green robe, staring blankly at a writing table in front of him with a faint smile on his face, which made him look very strange. On the writing table made of white jade, there was a brush, paper, and ink. On the white paper, there was a line of large characters dripping with ink. The characters were magnificent and thick, and faintly exuded a purple aura. The only strange thing was that, among the 4 treasures of the study on the table, an inkstone was missing. There were even a few drops of ink dripping onto the desk. They were like living creatures that were lightly rolling around on the smooth and flawless jade desk. They were as active as mercury beads. Interesting. The middle-aged man smiled and casually placed the brush on the writing rack. With a wave of his finger, the writing table disappeared without a trace. Sitting cross-legged on the cloud platform with a smile on his face, he leaned back on the soft cushion behind him, then nodded at Patriarch Yuan Hua, who was lying in the middle of the palace. "I haven't seen you for so many years. How did you manage to cultivate a cultivation technique of the Fiend League?" Patriarch Yuan Hua stared blankly at the middle-aged man, a blood-red gleam flickering in his eyes. Suddenly, he struggled to his feet, kowtowed and begged the man. "Junior Yuan Hua offers greetings, Senior. I've suffered a lot, and I hope Senior can help me." The middle-aged man laughed. Then, he turned to the 30-odd immortals in Taoist robes standing in the hall and said, "Look, I told you that I've chosen a junior brother for you in the outer heavenly realm, and I was going to take him in when he stepped into the realm of gold immortal. In those years, he was cultivating a proper cultivation technique of the Tao League. But after so many years, he has been possessed by the fiend." After a few laughs, the middle-aged man shook his head and said with a sigh, "Not only has he been possessed by the Fiend League, but he was also beaten to this state? TSK, the injury on your lower body is really strange. Not only your fleshly body was injured, but your soul was also injured. What a strange technique." Tears streamed down Patriarch Yuanhua's face, and he kept kowtowing and saying, "Please help me, senior. I was tricked by a few shameless juniors." The middle-aged man twitched his mouth, then shook his head and said, "Juniors? Not necessarily. I personally rescued you, but someone actually followed the traces I left behind and stole my most cherished purple inkstone." Shaking his head and laughing bitterly, the middle-aged man said in a deep voice, "I, Lord Lu, am not in a position to pursue this matter. I, a mighty primordial immortal, had my things stolen by a junior from the mortal realm. If word gets out, I won't be able to face anyone again." An old man in a Taoist robe stepped out of the great hall. He bowed and said, "Master, why don't you let the disciples handle this matter?" Waving his hand, Lord Lu said indifferently, "Why are you doing this? The outside world is in a state of chaos. Don't you think it's too troublesome for you to pay a visit? Someone is plotting a big game of chess. With just the strength of me and my 100 disciples, we can't afford to get involved. It's better for us to wait and watch the show, and then get a share of the pie when it's over. If we are really involved, it might be a catastrophe of heaven and earth." His facial muscles twitched a few times, and with a gloomy face, Lord Lu said in a low voice, "You haven't experienced it in those years. Every catastrophe of heaven and earth, even many primordial immortals will fall, and even the entire clan of the great emperors of the celestial court will be wiped out. You have no idea how terrible it is." Sighing, Lord Lu looked up at the ceiling and murmured, "Your ancestral master, my master, was a famous and almighty figure in those years, and he was also one of the 5 celestial emperors of the celestial court, the immortal who controlled the 5 divisions of wind, rain, thunder, and lightning in the celestial court." But in the last catastrophe, even the great celestial emperor, and the 5 celestial emperors of the 5 directions were all killed. Frowning, Lord Lu shook his head and said, "At that time, I had 1,897 senior brothers and sisters, all of whom were famous gold immortals. Among them, eldest senior brother and second senior brother had the same cultivation base as me now. But when the catastrophe struck, in just 1,000 years master fell, and all my senior brothers and sisters died, leaving me alone." Taking a deep breath, Lord Lu shook his head and said, "We still have to retrieve the purple heart inkstone from Yuan Hua." Not allowing his disciples to speak, Lord Lu pointed his finger out, and the blood-red flag wrapped around Patriarch Yuan Hua soared into the sky and flew into his hand. Lord Lu ran his finger across the flag, and his expression changed abruptly. What a ferocious innate spirit item. What a pity. Who was the one who cut it into this state? What a pity. His eyes flashed like lightning bolts as he gave Patriarch Yuanhua a glance, then cried out in a deep voice, "Yuanhua, or Lord Blood Ocean. Yuanhua's true spirit has fused with Lord Blood Ocean's remnant soul. You are actually the same person, and I'm too lazy to care about such a trivial matter. In the end, whether you are Patriarch Yuanhua, Lord Blood Ocean, or ancient celestial fiend Li Xuezi, you are still my little disciple." Patriarch Yuanhua was wild with joy. Hurriedly he crawled a few steps forward, kowtowed and said, "Greetings, Master. Greetings, Master. Master, please uphold justice for this disciple." Lord Lu narrowed his eyes, looking up at the ceiling and pondering for a long while. At last he nodded slowly and said with a smile, "You can help me, but you still have to rely on yourself. I can tell that although the flag is badly damaged, as long as you supply him with enough blood essence, he will be able to restore it to its original state." Patriarch Yuanhua nodded and said, "Master, you have a keen eye. That is indeed the case. Lord Lu laughed. With a wave of his hand, he sent the flag back to Patriarch Yuan Hua, then laughed aloud and said, "Now there is a good opportunity for you to do something. Penghu continent is filled with corpses, and this is the omen of something big, and many people are trying to fish in troubled waters. Just go to Penghu continent and do whatever you want. If there is a fortuitous encounter, you will be rewarded." Patriarch Yuan Hua was taken aback. Then he asked with a trembling voice, "What about that fellow Wuxia?" Lord Lu frowned. After counting with his fingers for a full quarter of an hour, his expression changed abruptly. Lord Lu cried out in shock. "With my attainment, how could I not be able to divine this lad's fate? Even if there are some almighty experts who have joined forces to disturb the heaven secret, it is only for Wuxia. According to what you said, he was just a nascent soul junior a few years ago, and those almighty experts are not disturbing the heaven secret for him. How could I not divine his situation?" Lord Lu tapped his fingers on his knee and said with a smile, "Interesting. Could it be that someone has been targeting him since long ago?" Waving his hand, Lord Lu said in a deep voice, "Yuan Hua, you are just a heaven immortal, and I've made an exception to take you as my disciple. You can do whatever you want when you go to Penghu continent. As for Wuxia, I'll deal with him in the future." Lord Lu gave a strange laugh, then looked thoughtfully at the map of mountains and rivers on the floor. "He will definitely go to Penghu continent," he murmured under his breath. "Perhaps it won't be long before you meet him." With a wave of his hand, a dozen gold immortal items, glinting with a faint purple-gold luster, flew before Patriarch Yuan Hua. Lord Lu asked Patriarch Yuan Hua to refine these gold immortal items, then casually waved his hand and tore open the void, sending Patriarch Yuan Hua straight to Penghu continent. Chapter 646. How could Wuxia know anything about what was happening beyond the nine heavens? The world of nine heavens was derived from the interstitial world, created by the ancient great saints. Unless one was a primordial immortal, even a peak-level gold immortal could not touch the world of nine heavens without permission. Ordinary immortals did not even know the name of the world of nine heavens, let alone what was happening inside. On Myriad Immortals' planet, Wuxia and Princess Zhonglu were nervously exercising their divine abilities to create the Myriad Spirits blood pool. The blood pool contained the blood essence of countless living beings on Myriad Immortals' planet. Apart from tens of thousands of longbow people who were lucky enough to survive, and some demons and fiends hiding in the mountains and oceans, all the blood essence of countless living beings on Myriad Immortals' planet was gathered here. After Patriarch Yuan Hua was taken away by Lord Lu, the blood pool lost control, and was about to explode. Perhaps the explosion would turn the entire planet into ashes. How could Wuxia allow such a thing to happen? If he sacrificed all the blood essence in the pool, that Lei Meng, the celestial fiend from the outer domain, would have to go to East Sea County to protect Wuxia? It was difficult to describe the benefits of having such a powerful celestial fiend worshipped in a short time. In short, there were countless benefits. Therefore, Wuxia and Princess Zhonglu were busy casting all kinds of restrictive spells. One had to prevent the blood pool from exploding, and the other had to prevent the blood pool from drying up. On top of that, the blood pool was filled with a towering aura of resentment. If they did not take good care of it, it would bring about unpredictable disasters. Little Kair stood blankly on Princess Zhongli's head, staring at the blood pool with disgust. The Phoenix bloodline had always been one of the noblest bloodlines in the world. Little Kair's aversion to all kinds of filth had been born in her mother's womb. So how could she tolerate such a foul and filthy blood pool? Ao Buzin, on the other hand, was sitting coiled on a large rock next to the pool of blood, laughing and holding a 2-foot-wide inkstone in his mouth. It was carved with an unknown stone and shrouded in a purple mist, with a silver gleam flashing faintly on its surface. His 2 front paws gently caressed the inkstone, like the most lecherous pervert caressing the tender skin of a young girl. Drool dripped from the corner of his mouth, and his shabby appearance was indescribable. This is too wonderful for words. It was actually an inkstone forged from the purple extreme vast sky stone above the 9th heaven. I can't believe it's an inkstone forged with the method of refining a primordial immortal artifact. Ao Buzin heaved a long sigh and said, "It's a pity that it hasn't formed an item spirit, and is just a dead object. But this embryo is the embryo of a primordial unity fairy artifact." Ao Buzin loosened his mouth and weighed the inkstone with both paws, then clenched his jaws and said, "It weighs 360 million kilograms, but I've refined it with the flying feather technique to only weigh 3 taels and 6 chien. Even an ordinary mortal can pick it up easily. As long as I cast it with an incantation, the 4,900 layers of meteor-burning moon formation embedded in the inkstone will increase its weight by another 10,000 times." After calculating with his fingers for a long while, Ao Buzin shook his head and said, "Although it's not a primordial unity fairy artifact, its lethality is still very terrifying. It can easily shatter a star with just one strike. A weight of 36 quadrillion kilogram. Who else can hide such a deadly strike in such a small inkstone, if he is not a primordial immortal? TSK, even a supreme-grade gold immortal artifact might not be able to withstand such a head-on strike." Laughing furtively, Ao Buzin craned his neck and glanced around. When he found that Wuxia did not seem to notice him, Ao Buzin quickly stuck out his long tongue, carefully made a small incision on the tip of his tongue with the tip of his paw, and dripped a few drops of his blood essence onto the inkstone. What a spendthrift! Why are all those primordial immortals so spendthrift? The bathtub that White Emperor's daughter used to take a bath in years ago was forged with the infinite stone forged with the divine flame of tranquility. But this guy here did not even put a restrictive spell on such an excellent treasure. Isn't he just giving it to Lao Tzu? It's not easy for Lao Tzu to regain his body, and he just happens to lack a powerful weapon to kill and plunder. The pale golden dragon blood transformed into a few twisted runes and fused into the inkstone. Shrouded in a purple mist, the inkstone slowly floated up into the air. Suddenly, it turned into a few plumes of purple smoke and squeezed into Ao Buzin's 7 orifices. Ao Buzin closed his eyes and quietly comprehended some of the information transmitted over from the purple mist. Suddenly he cursed under his breath. "Damn it, this purple inkstone has been used as an ordinary inkstone for 3 periods? Such a treasure should be used to kill, set fires and abduct beauties. How could it be used to draw and write? That's just too stingy." Stroking the inkstone delightedly, Ao Buzin stuck out his tongue and gave it a few licks. "Baby, be a good boy and follow me. From now on, I'll have a good life, and I'll have beautiful girls warming my bed every night. It's all thanks to you. When Lao Tzu regains his cultivation base, I'll go to the Holy Land of Dragons and steal a yuanling from my ancestor. I'll make it your item spirit. TSK, you'll be a real primordial immortal item." Wuxia had just tidied up the 10,000 spirits blood pool. He moved next to Ao Buzin, and happened to hear Ao Buzin's last words. Wuxia could not help but roll his eyes. He grabbed Ao Buzin and placed him on his shoulder. "You're thinking of digging up your ancestral grave and using your ancestor's yuanling as your item spirit? You're really a filial descendant." Ao Buzin laughed, his face not even blushing. He opened his mouth and swallowed the inkstone, then said happily, "Isn't that just recycling waste? Since all of them are dead, leaving yuanling behind will only serve as a tool for future generations to worship, to pass on the divine abilities and mystic techniques of dragons. It's better to let Lao Tzu take advantage of it." Rolling his eyes, Ao Buzin said in a low voice, "Are you interested in going to the Holy Land of Dragons together?" In the deepest part of the Holy Land, there are a few corpses of primordial divine dragons, who were born when the world was first created, enjoying the incense offerings there. Their dragon scales, horns, bones, skin, and tendons are all excellent materials for crafting primordial immortal items. Wuqi's eyes lit up abruptly. He turned to give Xiang Ao a look, then twitched the corner of his mouth into a faint smile. Ao Buzin laughed strangely as he gently flicked his 10 front claws, grinding the tips of his claws as if he was very familiar with the technique. Wuxia suddenly realized that Ao Buzin was just too adorable. How could he be so adorable? It was rare to see a descendant who could sell his ancestors' bones and flesh. They exchanged a glance, and then Chi-Chi let out a sneaky laugh. Wuqi moved to a tree in front of them, then bowed solemnly to Patriarch Jiang Yun, who sat under the tree with a pale face and remained silent. Princess Zhang Lu was standing next to Bai Wu. Goddess Qing Xia had her arm around Bai Wu's shoulder, and the two of them were whispering something to each other. Wuqi guessed that it was nothing more than the comforting words between women, and he was too lazy to eavesdrop with his divine ability. Before Patriarch Jiang Yun could react, Qing Xian and his two brothers from Tranquil Vimla sect hastily jumped to their feet with a dozen of their disciples, cupping their fists and thanking Wuqi deeply. Countless words of gratitude were uttered. Qing Xian and the others knew very well that if not for Wuqi and Princess Zhongli's arrival, perhaps the entire Tranquil Vimla sect would have long been wiped out. These immortals from Tranquil Vimla sect were a little pedantic, and it was impossible for them to submit to Patriarch Yuan Hua and be his accomplices. Therefore, they were doomed to die under Patriarch Yuan Hua's butcher's knife. They had cultivated to the realm of heaven immortals, and if nothing went wrong, they would live a free and unfettered life, never falling into the cycle of transmigration. Wuqi had saved them from the calamity of having their souls destroyed. Tranquil Vimla sect owed Wuqi too much. Qing Xian gave Patriarch Wuqi a look, then clenched his jaw and said resolutely to Wuqi in a deep voice, "Fellow immortal Wuqi, Tranquil Vimla sect owes you too much, and it's difficult for us to repay your kindness. If you need any help in the future, Tranquil Vimla sect will obey you without question." Qing Xian could tell that Wuqi's current divine ability and magic power had exceeded the limit of his imagination. He had met Wuqi many years ago, and he knew that Wuqi was not a harsh or tyrannical man. It was a great thing for Tranquil Vimla sect to have Wuqi as their backer. Wuqi was overjoyed, and hastily said a few nice words to Qing Xian. Although Qing Xian's cultivation base was not strong, there was nothing much to say about his way of doing things. To put it bluntly, everyone in Tranquil Vimla sect was a group of honest and kind people. If such people were willing to submit to him, it would be a great thing to bring them into Underhand sect. They were ready-made heaven immortals, and they could be put to good use with just a little training. So why not? Only then did Patriarch Jiang Yun come to his senses. He sprung to his feet, his face flushed red as he stared at Wuqi, unable to speak for a long while. After a full quarter of an hour, Patriarch Jiang Yun, whose face had turned as red as a pig's liver, gave a loud roar and dropped to his knees, kowtowing heavily to Wuqi. "Wuqi, what I've done this time is against my conscience. In the end, I've harmed others and myself. The death of countless living beings on Myriad Immortals' planet is unforgivable." Patriarch Jiang Yun wailed painfully. "I shouldn't have brought Patriarch Yuan Hua here. I shouldn't have done this. What a pity, what a pity." Wuqi was taken aback by Patriarch Jiang Yun's action. Without hesitation, he grabbed Patriarch Jiang Yun and shouted, "What does this have to do with Patriarch Yuan Hua? It is Patriarch Yuan Hua's fault. What does it have to do with you?" After capturing a large number of high-ranking disciples of Yuan Hua sect on Green Cliff Planet and White Cloud Planet, Wuqi had interrogated them with a soul-searching technique. He found out that Patriarch Jiang Yun knew nothing about Patriarch Yuan Hua. Patriarch Jiang Yun was a filial and docile person, and everything he did was passive. It was Patriarch Yuan Hua who forced him to come to Myriad Immortals' planet, and it had nothing to do with Patriarch Jiang Yun. Patriarch Jiang Yun had done nothing wrong in this matter. He was just an unlucky fellow who was powerless to resist Patriarch Yuan Hua's violent threat. Besides, Wuqi knew Patriarch Jiang Yun's character very well. Just like Qing Xian and the other two old Taoists, Patriarch Jiang Yun was an extremely pedantic old man in the world of cultivators, an unlucky fellow who deserved to be set up by others. Wuqi held Patriarch Jiang Yun and comforted him, then turned to Patriarch Jiang Yun and asked, "Patriarch, I've built up a foundation in the outside world, and the resentment in Myriad Immortals' planet is so strong that it's no longer a good place to live. Would Patriarch be willing to bring your disciples and follow me to start a business?" At this moment, Patriarch Jiang Yun was at his weakest mental state, and Wuqi had saved his entire clan. He owed Wuqi a great favor. Then, he glanced around at the myriad spirits' blood pool, which was 100 times more terrifying than hell. He shuddered, then cupped his fist and bowed respectfully to Wu Qi together with Bai Wu and Qing Xia. Wu Qi laughed joyfully. Both White Cloud Immortal Sect and Tranquil Vimla Sect were now in his hands. Chapter 647. Patriarch Jiang Yun and the other 6 ancestral masters, together with a total of 24 heaven immortal disciples, had submitted to Wu Qi. Wu Qi was not stingy either. He immediately taught Bai Wu and Qing Xia the cultivation technique of the Dark Yin water scripture, then taught Patriarch Jiang Yun, Qing Xian, Qing Shen, and Qing Yi the cultivation technique of the Song of Gale. As for their disciples, they were also taught accordingly. In addition to teaching them the mystic scriptures, Wu Qi also used the Tao imparting art of nascent divinity, which was found in the ancient Great Tao of Heaven God. At the cost of his own divine soul, he forcibly poured his understanding of the heavenly Tao into their immortal souls, helping them greatly improve their cultivation bases. If it were in the past, Wu Qi would have suffered a great loss of energy if he used the Tao imparting art of nascent divinity, which would greatly harm his future progress. But he had first absorbed the soul power of hundreds of millions of evil spirits on Pangu continent, and then obtained the enormous power of fiend souls left behind by Patriarch Yuan Hua in the myriad spirits' blood pool. Therefore, although it was very costly for him to use the Tao imparting art, it did not cause him much harm. Patriarch Jiang Yun and dozens of other heaven immortals sat cross-legged beside the blood pool, quietly comprehending the understanding of the heavenly Tao that Wu Qi had taught them. The blood cloud in the sky had disappeared. Wu Qi stood beside the blood pool, with Ao Buzin lying on his head, lazily inhaling and exhaling the purple inkstone, constantly sending his divine will into it to deepen the connection between him and it. Little Kair stood blankly on Wu Qi's shoulder, and this was the expression of the so-called stupefied chicken. From time to time, wisps of flame would spray out of her nostrils. The crimson flame was as clear as melted glass, without any temperature, but it carried a terrible aura that made one's heart tremble. Dressed in a luxurious dress, Princess Zhonglu stood on the surface of the blood pool with the tip of her foot. Ripples kept spreading out on the mirror-like surface of the pool, with Princess Zhongli's toes as the center. The sun was shining brightly in the sky, and the piles of corpses around the blood pool kept giving off a foul stench. The blood pool looked so clear under the sunlight that it looked like a huge blood-colored gem, so strangely beautiful that it was suffocating. Wu Qi put his hands under his sleeves and looked up at the sky indifferently. When the sun moved to the middle of the sky, Wu Qi nodded and said, "Zixian, you can start." Patting Ao Buzin and Little K on the head, Wu Qi said in a deep voice, "Let Ao Buzin recover some of his strength first, then help Little K purify her bloodline so that she can become a pure-blooded phoenix as soon as possible. After this is done, Ao Buzin, Little K, both of you will give me a strand of your bloodline." Ao Buzin and Little K responded in unison. Ao Buzin wagged his tail excitedly while Little K pecked Wu Qi's head intimately. The myriad spirits blood pool was formed by the blood essence of all the living beings on Myriad Immortals planet, and the amount of blood essence it contained was immeasurable. Sacrificing these blood essences and the nearby corpses to Lei Meng would undoubtedly bring him tremendous power. There was a limit to how much energy Patriarch Jiang Yin and the others could improve, so he decided to let Ao Buzin and Little Kair reap the benefits first. As for Wu Qi and Princess Zhonglu, they had already reached the threshold of Gold Immortal Realm, and no external force could help them break through the realm. They could only rely on themselves. Therefore, Wu Qi would not share any of the benefits this time. Judging from the strength of the chaotic dragon body Ao Buzin currently possessed, if this cunning and shameless dragon could obtain most of the power from this sacrifice, to what extent could he recover? Gold Immortal? At least a Gold Immortal? If the power obtained by sacrificing the blood essence and corpses of countless living beings on Myriad Immortals planet could not make a Gold Immortal, then it would be a shame. As Wu Qi spoke, Princess Zhonglu slowly raised her hands and began to recite the incantation of the blood sacrifice. Gusts of chilly wind came blowing from all directions, causing tiny ripples that looked like fish scales to appear on the surface of the myriad spirits' blood pool. Vaguely, shrill howls could be heard coming out from under the ground, and the sky was covered with dark clouds and mist. The dazzling sun was obscured by the clouds and mist, turning the surroundings gray and hazy. From the hills, lakes and forests of Myriad Immortals' planet, a large number of Een deities slowly walked out, exercising their divine abilities and flying toward the pool. The incantation of Princess Zhonglu could not only attract celestial fiends from outer domains, but also mobilize these Een deities and demonic ghosts. Before long, more than 10 million Een deities and demonic ghosts had gathered around the pool. Wuxia exercised his chaotic divine eyes and stared in astonishment at these densely packed Een deities and demonic ghosts. At the same time, more Een deities were flying toward the pool along with the chilly wind. Tens of thousands of miles around them were filled with otherworldly items dragging gray halos behind them. Wuxia shuddered involuntarily, wondering why there were so many mountain spirits and water ghosts on Myriad Immortals' planet. When he thought of the Tao of ghosts and deities that Great Chu cultivated, Wuxia could not help but wonder if King Yongqiu's father had intentionally placed so many otherworldly items here. Where did he find so many ghosts and deities, and how did he imprison all of them in Myriad Immortals' planet, preventing them from leaving? As Princess Zhonglu recited the incantation, the void above their heads suddenly shook, and the void within about 100 miles around began to ripple like water. Princess Zhonglu murmured Lei Meng's true name, turning it into a strange wave with a spell, and sending it into the constantly fluctuating void. A shrill, strange howl rang out as dozens of extremely short ghosts and deities from outer domains rushed out of the void. As soon as these strange-looking ghosts and deities arrived in this world, they let out joyful cries. Hundreds of Een deities who had gathered together collided with these ghosts and deities. The ghosts and deities roared angrily at first, then burst into a deafening cheer. Whether they were ghosts and deities or the local Een deities of Myriad Immortals' planet, they were essentially the aggregates of souls, and by devouring each other, they could enhance their overall strength. Princess Zhongli's incantation had gathered all the Een deities on Myriad Immortals' planet, and there were hundreds of millions of them. The dozens of little ghosts and deities jumped up and down with joy, opening their mouths and inhaling fiercely. Countless shrill howls rang out as the hundreds of millions of Een deities suddenly discovered these strange creatures from outer domains. They also let out shrill howls like chi-chi, then opened their mouths and inhaled fiercely at the ghosts and deities at the same time. These existences from outer domains were at least 100 times stronger than the Een deities of Myriad Immortals' planet. But in terms of quantity, they were too few. When hundreds of millions of Een deities attacked at the same time, the ghosts and deities could only let out a miserable howl before their bodies disintegrated in an instant, turning into countless beams of light that scattered in all directions and were devoured by the surrounding Een deities. Some of the Een deities managed to snatch the scattered beams of light. Their bodies suddenly became much clearer, and their overall strength was more than doubled. After tasting the benefits, these Een deities, who had no intelligence and only acted on instinct, cheered. Then they transformed into gusts of chilly wind and flew toward the twisting void. They wanted to invade the world where the ghosts and deities lived through the portal, and hunt for the prey that could strengthen them. Ao Buzan rolled his eyes and laughed mockingly. What a bunch of bumpkins! Do they really want to go there and die? Even those ancient great saints dare not to enter the world where the ghosts and deities from outer domains live. You think they can do that? Before Ao Buzan's laughter faded away, a blinding flash of lightning suddenly flashed across the void, and then a fearsome ghost and deity, hundreds of miles tall and shrouded in dark thunderclouds, gradually poked his head out of the void. The projection of Lei Meng's true form slowly descended into this world. How dare a bunch of ants be so rude? TSK, why does it smell so good? What is it that smells so good? Lei Meng's eyes shone with dazzling lightning as he suddenly burst into an earth-shattering cheer. Wonderful! What a generous blood sacrifice! Wonderful! Who is it? Who offered such a generous sacrifice to me, Lei Mao? What do you want? Power or a mystic technique you practice? Tell me, what do you want? Princess Zhongli floated up into the air and snapped. Lei Meng, do you still remember me? Do you remember your promise? Lei Meng fixed his eyes on Princess Zhongli. He slapped himself on the head and burst into laughter. It's you, woman. Of course I remember. After 360 sacrifices, I, Lei Meng, have become the ancestral god of your clan. Well, I'm very satisfied with the sacrifice this time. From now on, I, Lei Meng, am the ancestral god of your clan. Sacrifice with all your heart, and I will give you endless benefits. Rubbing his hands greedily, Lei Meng pointed at the hundreds of millions of Yin deities who were fleeing in panic nearby and asked, Are these little ants also sacrifices? Wuxia laughed and said, If you say so, then so be it. But the few living people by the blood pool are our people. Lei Meng burst into laughter. He waved his hand and said with satisfaction, I see. That's it. Mountains of corpses flew up into the sky and into the dark clouds around Lei Meng. Wuxia opened his chaotic divine eyes and saw through the dark clouds. Behind the dark clouds was a vast wasteland filled with thunderclouds, and the corpses were falling toward it. In the wasteland, a huge fiend figure, tens of thousands of miles tall and composed entirely of lightning, was sitting cross-legged, constantly reaching out to grab a large number of corpses and shoving them into its mouth. That huge fiend figure was Lei Meng's true form, right? It was no wonder that his true body could not appear in this world. A gigantic ghost god that was 10,000 miles tall. In just a few breaths of time, countless corpses were sucked dry. Then monstrous waves rose from the myriad spirits' blood pool, and a great amount of blood soared into the sky and plunged into the thunderclouds. Along with the blood, countless ghosts were sucked away. They let out shrill wails as they were sucked clean by Lei Meng's divine ability. Lei Meng joyfully received all the sacrifices, then burst into laughter and said, Now it's time for me, the ancestor god, to give you back. Accept the power. To us, the power you need is just the waste produced after digesting the blood essence. It is of no use to me, but to you it is too precious. As he laughed wildly, a stream of blood-red light poured down from the sky. In the void, with myriad immortals' planet as the center, countless bolts of lightning were making loud crackling noises, forming a huge thunder formation over 10 million miles in diameter around the planet. A terrible force of thunder was brewing in the formation, and in the center of the thunder formation, directly facing myriad immortals' planet, a huge, merciless eye was slowly opening. A heavenly tribulation had arrived, and it was the myriad thunder wrath that only existed in the legends. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.